It's 6 o'clock, so welcome to this meeting of the full council. It's welcome to Reverend James Ratu, who's going to say prayers for us this evening, and also a very special warm welcome to Elizabeth, Ryan and Neve and Mrs. Loosley from Broadwater School. And they will be speaking to us as well before the meeting proper starts. So Reverend James, over to you to lead us in a moment of reflection on this St. George's Day.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord of us all, we ask your blessing on this borough of Waverley with all its diversity. The souls who call it home, the people who come here to work, the children of its schools and the old, the towns and the villages that make it up. May harm and danger be far from it, so that its people can pursue peace and goodness without fear. Lord, all the created world serves you, and we are aware of our common nature as your children. Please strengthen us and all those elected to public office in this borough for the work we are called to do. We are aware that there are many needs and interests that must be balanced so that the decisions we take can be just. Please help us listen with a desire to find the best way forward. For those who work for this borough and serve its people and purposes, we pray diligence, steadfastness, and care. Lord, we thank you for all those who give up their time and energies to serve others across this borough, people of many different faiths and none. May no act of kindness in this community go unrewarded in your sight. Great God, in this spring season of growth, we pray for the continued fruitfulness of the earth, which we cannot survive without, for favorable weather, and for the courage to preserve and restore your great gifts to us. Help us to share the good things we have and the abilities we possess, and to defend all that is right and good, so that all your children may flourish. And in a world where peace seems far away from so many of your children, where violence and conflict scar and destroy lives, we pray for peace in our communities, insofar as depends on us. Lord and King, whatever befalls us, give us the gifts of generosity, truthfulness, and kindness we need to nurture now and in the times to come. And on this feast of great George, the patron saint of England, may we confront the dragons of our own fears and prejudices with boldness and endless desire for all that is good. Amen.
Thank you very much, James. And I'm sure that you would like to stay and listen to these young champions who are going to take on all of life's challenges and serve their community. So I am delighted to welcome Elizabeth, Ryan and Neve to speak to us for a few minutes now on behalf of your school community. So over to you.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting us to speak to you at your council meeting. My name is Neve.
My name is Elizabeth.
And my name is Ryan, and we are prefects at Broadwater School. Our main topic for consideration this evening is positive mental health and well-being. We have recognised that a legacy of COVID is people isolating themselves within a sedentary lifestyle. For example, a reliance on mobile phones and technology leading to a more digitalised outlook on life. Within our school community, we strive to promote positive thinking and well-being for both the students and the staff by offering support in a contented environment.
A way we believe we can spread awareness is advocating our core principles of work hard, be kind, and make a difference. We see these beliefs as a way to approach everyday life in an optimistic manner. We propose that this be done through the organisation of funding for more youth clubs, wellbeing gardens, and events such as fairs to connect us with the true meaning of community. We've realised that the youth club is more accessible to Broadwater students and are unaware of any other involvements from the surrounding areas, which is what we look to make significant changes to. We see the current events, such as community markets and staycations, provide an opportunity for different community groups to come together and support each other.
We believe there is a need within our community to develop a unique wellbeing environment, and this would be facilitate a healthy escape for those feeling overwhelmed. We've been inspired by the recent creation of the Farncombe Community Garden opposite our school. We think there is a perfect location opposite the Crown Court car park. The positives that support this are it would be near local junior and infant schools, near local cafes and shops, and accessible. To ensure this is a true community effort, we would like to be part of a planning, design and creation committee.
We truly believe that this would promote positivity and hope for across all communities. We would like to thank the Worshipful Mayor of Waverley, Councillor Penny Rivers, for the opportunity to share with you our ideas and thoughts this evening.
On behalf of everybody here, thank you very much. And I think we can all learn from your school motto, work hard, be kind, and make a difference. Let's try and do that together, hey? And Paul Rivers is going to escort you out, and he has a little token of my gratitude. Thank you very much indeed. See you soon. Thank you, James. You may like to stay for our whole meeting, or you also may like to escape. That is entirely up to you. So thank you, everybody, and welcome to this evening's council meeting. Please raise your hand to indicate you wish to speak. You'll be operating your own microphones. If you're unable to hear, please indicate. This meeting will be live streamed and you will be using your electronic voting system using the consoles in front of you. When a vote is called for, they will light up and you will be able to vote. For is on the left, abstain is in the middle, and against is the right hand button. If anybody calls for a recorded vote and is duly supported by 5 others, we will do this by the roll call in the normal way. If members are happy to agree a recommendation by general assent, we will do that in the usual way. Speeches will be timed at 4 minutes. You will be given a 30-second warning before your time is up. Members may speak only once on each item, except in the circumstances as set out in Procedure Rule 14.6. If you're making a point of order, please be clear about which procedure, law or rule you think has been breached and how, and wait for my agreement before you proceed. So agenda item number 1, Kim, are there any apologies?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have apologies from councillors Janet Crowe, Michael Goodridge, George Hess and Michaela Wicks.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, the minutes. The minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of February have been published online and circulated with your agendas. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is the very first time I've ever been able to do this, so I will go ahead with it. And I believe there is an error in the minutes. When we were discussing or voting on the substantive vote for the budget on page 10, it will identify there that there are 37 members who voted for. There are only 36 names listed. And I know the member whose name is missing would be absolutely mortified if his name wasn't recorded for posterity, and that is Councillor Hyman. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. So with that, do you approve the minutes? Thank you. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any? No. Agenda item 4, Pedro is going to make or announce some good news for us.
Well, I think what I want to announce is a welcome, in fact, to Councillor Alan Earwaker, elected to the ward of Farnham Castle, to represent the ward of Farnham Castle. So I just want to, on behalf of Waverley Council, on behalf of the officers and all councillors gathered here, welcome to your first meeting.
Welcome, Alan. And my announcements, very brief. Thank you to those who joined us outside for the raising of the flag for St. George this morning. And I look forward to seeing everybody at Godalming Museum on Friday, the 3rd of May at 6 o'clock for the private view of the exhibition by the artist from the Meath. And this is something that I'm co-hosting with the Mayor of Godalming. So we hope to see you all there. Agenda item 5, leaders' announcements. Leader.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the public. May I first of all start by thanking you for inviting those students from Broadwater. In my capacity as one of the 2 ward members, and I'm sure Councillor Keel will agree, I'd be very pleased to meet with them. It's certainly long been an ambition of mine to make Crown Court the magnificent vista that some proclaimed it to be. So this seems to be an opportunity to do that. So certainly very happy to meet with those students at Broadwater so we can continue that discussion further. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome Councillor Earwaker this evening, and also to thank the Electoral Services team and other members of staff who've supported the by-election and the counts for the Farnham Castle by-election. They are, of course, still working hard in regards to the Whitley and Milford by-election and the Police and Crime Commissioner elections at the moment, and those polls are to be held on Thursday, May the 2nd, and will be counted on the morning of May the 3rd. I've also been privileged this week and over the past few weeks to attend a variety of town and parish sessions, including the annual meetings of Whitley and Milford, last night at Farnham Town Council and a couple of weeks ago at my hometown of Godalming. I also attended a very productive session at Planning Committee session at Orfold Parish, and I wanted to extend my thanks to those clerks and members, and of course extend our usual offer on behalf of the executive and myself to any other parishes who would like any of us to attend to take questions on any matter relating to the remit of Waverley Borough Council. And on that note, I have a small subsection of the executive wishing to make some comments this evening in light of the agenda's length, starting with Councillor Merriweather. If I have missed any of you members of the executive, please do shout. Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Paul. Evening, Madam Mayor. We were delighted to announce on April 10 that Loungers PLC, the owner of Loungers Restaurants, has signed an agreement for the lease with Waverley Borough Council to occupy 69 High Street, Godalming, the front part. A planning application for the commercial part of the development will be submitted by the end of the month. And we also hosted drop-in sessions in the Berries last week for local residents to see plans and give their views on those proposals. And it was quite heartwarming to see so many businesses from the High Street also pop in to give us their encouragement. Residents can also view and comment on the plans on our Commonplace platform, which also has answers to the most frequently asked questions. And so far, we've had 550 visits to the site, in addition to the residents we've met in person. And I'm very pleased to report that the feedback so far has been positive. And our key aim now is to ensure this first part of the development happens quickly, so that we can move on to the, if you'll pardon the pun, the main course of developing up to 10 new much needed affordable homes on the larger part of the site to the rear. These new living spaces will be energy efficient and designed sympathetically to the surrounding area. The homes will reflect the council's strategy to create more affordable housing in Godalming, as well as protecting the environment by using a previously developed site and optimising the space. A planning application for the housing will be submitted later this year. Can I just thank our officers for their professionalism, and can I thank loungers for their confidence in Godalming and in us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Merriweather. Councillor Paul Rivers.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Mayor. Just a brief word on the tenants panel. I thank Terry Dobney, who is chair of the Waverley Tenants panel, for running the tenant open meeting last Thursday that was here. It was a most worthwhile meeting and good for us councillors to hear directly from tenants and to witness how effective and supportive are our officers. Main point is I encourage all tenants, or as many tenants who wish, to join the panel. It is in fact the 30th anniversary next year of the tenants panel, and it's an opportunity for our tenants to hold us to account. So if you see any tenant, have a word with them, councillors, and encourage them so to join. Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you. First, we will be hearing more about air quality issues a little bit later in response to Councillor Hyman's question. At this point, I just wanted to take the opportunity to make one observation in relation to air quality, which is of real concern to all of us councillors, that it is somewhat ironic that at a time when it is clear that poor air quality is compromising the health and even the lives of children, the elderly, the vulnerable and others, DEFRA has announced that the Air Quality Minister, Robbie Moore, has used his discretion not to fund the local air quality grant scheme for the current financial year. That's deeply disappointing, and in a sense it typifies some of the ways in which our efforts as a local authority are constantly being thwarted by central government. On a more positive note, whilst I don't approve of the government's bidding culture to fund essential works in local government, I'm at least relieved that our officers in Waverley are very good at it. And I'd really like to take this opportunity to congratulate our sustainability team and the leisure services team and the housing team on the successful bids to secure £1,545,000 from the public sector decarbonisation scheme to fund decarbonisation energy efficiency measures to supply new air source heat pumps for the Farnham Leisure Centre, and particular thanks to the team that put together that bid. Also, £279,000 from the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund to help Waverley Borough Council's £500,000 project to upgrade some of our most energy inefficient homes through a fabric first approach. These represent a real success which will provide real benefits to Farnham residents and our council tenants, as well as dramatically reducing our carbon emissions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. That concludes item 6 on behalf of the Executive.
Thank you very much. All agenda item 5. Yeah, that's all right. We come now to agenda item 6, which is questions from the public, and there are 8 questions. So the first question is from Daniel Kuzel, who I believe is not here nor online. No. So I will read his question. His question is, could the leader explain why the Freedom of Information team is not responding to queries for information within the statutory 20-day working day period? Is he aware that the team is still using COVID-19 as a reason for not meeting the statutory deadline. Could he explain why the completion of the FOI requests continues to be affected by COVID-19 when it appears that all other council services have returned to normal operation?
If I may, Councillor Keele will answer that on my behalf.
Thank you. Councillor Keele.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you to Mr Cazell for his question, which I am responding to as co-portfolio holder for legal services. The Council takes its obligations under the Freedom of Information Act seriously. This includes responding to FOI requests within the statutory timelines of 20 working days. During COVID, all public authorities in the UK, including Waverley Borough Council, were unable to meet the statutory timelines for responding to FOI requests. However, post-COVID, local authority officers, including Waverley Borough Council officers, were able to return to their offices, and this improved their compliance rate for FOI requests. Waverley Borough Council has stopped using COVID as a reason for non-compliance with FOI statutory timescales. However, it is noted that since the COVID-19 pandemic, the Council has been receiving a large amount of FOI requests, coupled with pressures due to staff absences, sickness and resources. To ensure the Council improves its FOI compliance record, we have recently increased the number of officers working in the FOI team from 1 to 3 officers. The Council is also working on upscaling the knowledge of the team and officers by arranging refresher training on the Freedom of Information Act 2000. In the last 2 months, the new team have reduced the number of late responses by 80%, and they hope to clear all the backlog within the next couple of months. Every member of the public can, of course, refer their dissatisfaction with the way the Council has handled their FOI request to the Information Commissioner's Office. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keele. Our next question is from Katie Hobson on behalf of CranleyHighStreet.uk team. So I believe you are here to ask your question.
Thank you. This question is in relation to the new Cranley Leisure Centre and the proposal to build it in the middle of Village Way car park. The minutes of the Cranley Parish Council AGM on the 9th of March 2023 state that Councillor E. Townsend spoke about the proposed new leisure centre in her role as portfolio holder for planning and economic development at Waverley Borough Council. When asked, will there be a consultation on the location of the new leisure centre, Councillor Townsend answered, once a consultant has been formally appointed, there will be more information available and a full consultation on its final location. Councillor Townsend also explained that there will be disruption to parking to begin with, but at the conclusion of the project, there will not be any parking lost. When asked about the amount of usable parking available during the construction, Councillor Townsend explained that there would be disruption, but about half of the car park should still be usable. The latest designs show that 68 parking spaces will be lost from Village Way car park at the end of the project, 235 spaces versus 303 now, and it appears that there will be very few parking spaces available during construction itself, significantly less than half. Please could the Council confirm, A, where in Cranley will the 68 new car parking spaces be located to ensure no loss of parking, and B, when the full consultation on the final location of the new leisure centre, as referred to above, will take place.
Thank you very much for the question. Councillor Townsend to respond.
Thank you, and thank you, Katie, for the question. So, in answer to the first part, the Council and the project team are very aware that parking is a key consideration on the site, both during construction and post-build. The plans shown during the engagement stages were draft and highlighted as indicative concept plans that are still emerging. Due to the importance of the matter and the impact on both residents and local businesses, a separate officer work stream has been put in place to review the challenges and to identify possible solutions, including alternative transport. Officers will be investigating all village parking options as well as identifying what changes to space sizes may be required to comply with Surrey County Council's policies. I would stress that we are committed to providing adequate disabled, family and EV charging point spaces in Village Way car park, which are not all available at the moment. We will also be looking to maximise parking options at every stage throughout the project to minimise disruption for the local community. And with regard to the second part of the question, the Council has taken the following consultation and project awareness steps on the new Cranley Leisure Centre, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to list these, Madam Mayor, please bear with me. Number one, roundtable meetings during September and November 2023 with nearest neighbours to discuss initial questions and concerns, which included Cranley Parish Council, the Medical Centre, the Market, the Co-op, Cranley Hospital and Cranley League of Friends. And then number two, we carried out a leisure centre user survey on the 11th of December to the 19th of January 2024. And that include leisure centre users, their membership. They were asked to give feedback on the facility mix. There was a survey carried out via Microsoft Forms shared with leisure centre users via Everyone Active, and more widely with residents in the borough as well. The survey was shared via our social media and press as well. And we had about 810 responses to that survey, and the feedback was recorded and obviously shared with the project team. We had set up a commonplace and a project email account. So we've got details on our website, and that's been available since September 2023. We've had an update with the local ward councillors, which took place in the council offices here on the 12th of January. The Commonplace Project Information Hub, we launched that on the 6th of March. And the scheme details were available as well, including copies of the information boards that we took in our community drop-in sessions, which obviously showed the proposed concept and area of the leisure centre. And we had, to the Commonplace, we had also put on a frequently asked questions, and we ran another resident survey, which ran from the 6th of March to the 22nd of March, with approximately 1,200 visitors to the hub and over 50 written responses to that. We also advertised on social media as well to the wider borough, and again shared with our ward and parish councillors, including with neighbouring parishes as well. And we put up posters as well, and there was a QR code as well linked to that to make sure that people could access the information online. And then with the community drop-in sessions that we held, again, we had the boards, which again are available on Commonplace, and that was held between Friday the 15th and Saturday the 16th of March in the Village Hall and at the Leisure Centre. Over 200 people attended those sessions across the 2 days. And our planning consultants have produced a written report of all the comments received, which they are using to inform the detailed design and the subsequent planning application. We will, in the next few weeks, update our Commonplace Information Hub with answers to the more detailed questions that have been asked by residents, and we are intending to update our key stakeholders as well. Those are the people who live and work immediately close to the development. Prior to these steps, we also carried out a full feasibility assessment and location consultation stage for the new build Cranley Leisure Centre. In 2019, the Sport, Leisure and Culture Consultancy, known as SLC, were appointed to conduct an options appraisal to explore the alternative site options for development of a new leisure facility for Cranley. Following COVID-19, a feasibility update report was undertaken by SLC. In September 2021, this tested then the conclusions from the earlier pre-pandemic options appraisal. So re-looking at the options that have been put forward previously. SLC shortlisting of options and subsequent evaluation identified the new build on Village Way car park as the preferred scheme, not the exact location, which obviously we've been presenting subsequently to residents, which is more in the centre of the Village Way car park. And the SLC identified that this was the preferred location for the scheme because it avoids any loss of service to the community, as the new centre can be opened before the existing centre closes. This includes public swimming, including swimming club, lessons, especially school classes, rehabilitation programs, dementia and Parkinson's exercise classes, as well as standard exercise classes and gym sessions. The leisure centre attracts approximately 3,103 visits per week to the centre, all of whom will be kept fully informed of the build stages and parking options later on. It provides the position in Village Way car park also provided the strongest revenue position for the council and has no negative financial impact upon the remaining term of the existing management contract with Everyone Active. It has an optimal layout with accessibility options, including wider corridors, a lift and a pod system for lowering visitors into the pool. This provides an opportunity, also provides an opportunity to contribute strongly to improvements in the wider Village Way site, which is at the moment a big obviously tarmacked area, with additional landscaping and adequate pedestrian access as well across the car park. The scheme has received favourable feedback from the Planning Authority, which recognises the opportunity to improve the services provided and the impact on the environment and also the wider public realm. The preferred location maintains all leisure centre services for the community and the employment of the Cranley Leisure Centre staff. It also maximises the opportunities for secondary visitors to our high street during the build phase. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. And the next question, I think, is addressed to you as well. Is Virginia Ray online? No. So I'll read her question. It is proposed that the new Cranley Leisure Centre is to be built in the middle of Village Way car park, resulting in the likelihood of little to no public parking being available during the construction period, once parking for leisure centre staff and users of the medical centre has been allocated. The current designs show that once construction is completed, there will be just 235 car parking spaces, a reduction of 22% from the 303 available now, all while the footfall for the new leisure is projected to be greater than it is now, and while new houses continue to be built in Cranley. Has an impact assessment been undertaken to determine the effects on the high street businesses of this substantial loss of car parking? 1. During the construction, which is expected to be circa 2 years. 2. Once the whole project has been completed. If an impact assessment has not been carried out, what are the council's expectations in respect of the impact on Cranley High Street businesses? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Obviously, some of what I provided to the previous question will also apply, and I'm sorry if there's a slight bit of repetition here. So again, thank you for the question. The current plans are draft concept plans showing an indication of the design at this stage. These are currently being developed and will continue to be throughout the remainder of the detailed design phase. Parking is a key consideration both during and post-build. And as such, all possibilities for further parking are currently being explored in the village centre to maximise parking in the long term and minimise disruption to residents and businesses during the construction phase. The planning application, once submitted, will include details of the interim parking arrangements during this construction phase, as well as a comprehensive construction traffic management plan. Due to the importance of this matter and the potential impact on both residents and local businesses, a separate officer work stream has been put in place to review the challenges, both short and long term, and to identify possible solutions, including access to alternative transport options during the build phase. I would add that as the portfolio holder, I'm also in regular contact with representatives of Cranley Chamber of Commerce and the Business Improvement District. Once this work is complete, officers will be in a position to present a more detailed overview of the final parking options proposals. The project team are very aware, as am I, of the complexity of the parking arrangements, and particularly of access during construction and moving forward from the concept stage. This does form part of the detailed work being undertaken, whilst mitigating wherever possible the impact on residents and local businesses. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Our next question is from Daniel Husseini. Is he online? No. So I shall read his question. Would the leader please provide an update on Broadwater Park Golf Course in Godalming? In particular, I understand that the legal negotiations are now complete and that the old golf course land is now wholly in the hands of Waverley Borough Council. What have been the total costs, including all legal costs, since May 2019? And what further cost to the council are anticipated? 2. The leader has talked of a facility at Broadwater Park to rival Surrey University Sports Park. What are the current plans of the administration for this area, and when will there be meaningful consultation with members of the public? And 3, when will the land recovery and capping commence? How long will it take, and what daily lorry movements are anticipated? Leader to respond, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and thank you for your questions, Mr. Hussaini. I will try and take these in each of the blocks as you've written them. So the first, in response to the first sections, the council has spent a total of £284,653 on the project so far, which includes legal costs and the further work to clear, assess, monitor the site, and begin the process of specialist work on the site for the next phase. It was a great shame that despite coming to terms on 2 occasions, proposals that came to this council and were approved, that the opposing party was not able to deliver on those terms, extending the dispute for longer than we had all hoped. This was, of course, satisfactorily resolved last year. But let's compare this to the value of the original lease that was proposed, the one that our administration halted. In the scenario that in which that lease was granted, the losses to the council over the almost 100 years that lease was proposed to run at substantially less than market rate obviously dwarfs this amount by orders of magnitude. And that's before we get into the capping of the landfill, a process that should in itself generate revenue. And I'll cover this in my response to the following question from Mr. Benson, and I'll make sure, Mr. Hussaini, that you receive both this response and that of Mr. Benson's as they're related. In the second point regarding the facility and its future, and once we've completed the work on the site, we'll be in a better position to consider the long-term future of the site. Meaningful consultation is a fairly subjective term, particularly when you're talking about local government consultation. Certainly, in my opinion, we've had at least one round of meaningful consultation. It was actually one of the most responded to engagement exercises in the history of this borough. And we had, I think, very meaningful responses from the community at large. And as I have said many times, and it's interesting that by quoting me in the way that you have done, Mr. Hussaini, you were clearly at a session when I spoke about this in more depth, that we intend to work with the groups that are involved in this and consult further, and not just the community at large, but also specific groups. So, for example, residents around the perimeter of the site, of course, but also Sport Godalming, whose AGM I spoke at a couple of weeks ago to reinforce this very point. It is our ambition to produce a formal vision for Broadwater Park by the end of this year, which will also go out to public consultation, and it is my hope to involve organisations such as Sport Godalming and our other partners in the development of that vision in the first place. In terms of the recovery and capping and how long it will take and lorry movements, it's worth reminding everyone, not just here, but residents in general, that the previous leaseholder had consent from Surrey to undertake a capping of this landfill. So this was going to happen anyway in some form. At least it does so now for the wider public good. Public good in first instance in terms of financial value, but also in terms of that wider community value that this site will bring. The outputs of this survey work will inform the final details for the capping, and I actually think probably it's going to be a little bit more in depth than the original one that was proposed and passed by Surrey County Council in their planning capacity. But I think one thing I would point out is that we're also waiting for the final surveys and also things that we're discussing with residents, because it might actually impact how that capping works. So, for example, we wouldn't want to necessarily flatten the site if we wanted to put a BMX track on it. We'd actually want to use the topography of the landfill to some kind of reasonable use, and one that also might reduce costs in the long run. So we do need to have all those details before we go forward. And when I do have those specific details, I will, of course, be reporting to council and residents in general in greater depth. Thank you, Mr. Hussaini. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So the next question is from Richard Benson. Is Richard Benson online? No. Richard Benson is not online, so I'll read out his question too. The Broadwater Golf Club site. The site area is approximately 80,000 square metres. Based on data from the Environment Agency, the cost of capping the site will be approximately £2,400,000. The recommended aftercare period is at least 60 years. Questions. 1. Does the leader agree that the cost of capping the Broadwater Golf Club site will be at least £2,400,000? 2. If the leader does not agree, what is his estimate of the cost of capping the Broadwater Golf Club site? 3. Where will the funds come from to pay for the cost of capping? And 4. What is the leader's estimate for the annual aftercare cost? Leader to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Benson. And as I mentioned earlier, this does effectively extend the questions from the previous member of the public. As to question 1, 2 and 3, at present I can't comment on the amount that the EA have specified. As per my answer at the end of the previous question, it will depend on the way the land is ultimately used. I would also note the distinction of who bears any costs in terms of capping. Now, my understanding of how the EA have actually interpreted that is how much it would cost someone to cap it. Now, as the owner of the land, in the case we are with Waverley, my understanding of how capping actually works for landfills like this is that soil, rubble, spoil from other development is effectively deposited for a fee on sites like this to cap a landfill. Now, in the case of us, that means that we will be taking money to deposit soil from developers on the site. So rather than it being a cost to the council, it is in fact a financial income for the council. So whilst I expect there is a determination from the EA that such a thing as this does cost money to somebody, it is in fact a benefit to the council, such as it was that it was actually articulated as a benefit by the previous leaseholder as such. So whilst there might be a change in the value of that capping, for us that's something that obviously we'll need to explore, and again is subject to the details of what the land will ultimately be used for. I suspect that will actually be a benefit to the council, a public benefit to the community, and I will certainly stop referring to the site as the Broadwater Golf Club site. I will probably start referring to it as the community land of Waverley owned at Broadwater Park or something to that effect. As to the long-running costs and the business cases that surround them, it depends on what exactly we do with it. And as with all council activities, it's essential that we look at the long-term running costs related to any project and the long-term management of the landfill cap, because they aren't permanent. They shift. There are lots of issues with landfills in generally and how you cap them. Not just because of the manner in which they are capped, but the composition of the landfill of which you are capping is highly material to the life and quality of that cap and its aftercare. We are in the process of doing the evaluation of that process again, following the expiry of the previous consent from Surrey County Council. So I will be, of course, able to give more detail when we know a bit more about what we're going to use it for and also about the nature of what sort of cap is required. Thank you, Mr. Benson, and thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Our next question is from Alex Page. Is Alex Page online? He is not. So I will read out his question. Fairground Development Project. On April the 9th, the Executive approved a budget for the procurement of services that are required for the purposes of preparation, planning, and implementation of the procurement strategy. As it seems, some of the assessments have not been completed, and those that have appear to be less comprehensive than required, remembering the details of the land plan too. And the full council meeting means there was only a 2-week gap for those assessments, let alone signing contracts for those services, so that the council can provide informed consent to this budget. What is the rush? Noting the difference in how this budget was presented to the council compared to the budget for the Godalming High Street budget. Councillor Merriweather to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Alex for this question, which of course relates to the fairground site matter to be considered under item 10 of this agenda. I'm afraid it's not entirely clear what assessments Alex is referring to here. but I'm sure we'd be happy to respond more fully if Alex can provide that clarity. In the meantime, though, I would say that the work that's been done to date has really been at the feasibility level, and perhaps some of the assessments Alex has in mind are those that can only follow in the future once we have a development partner and we move into the more substantive design stages. Further council approval will be needed to advance into the detailed design, planning and construction stage. All of this work is anchored in delivering a local plan Part 2 commitment for Hazelmere, which allocates the site for a mixed-use development of residential and commercial use. It's essential that the council delivers its own council-owned sites that have been allocated in LPP2, and the recommendation at tonight's council and last week's executive seek to move this project into the next phase of that work. All assessments required for planning purposes will be carried out as necessary following the attended appointment of a development partner, and the cost of the work to progress through procurement to appointment is captured within the business case. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Our next question is from Brian Edmonds. Is Brian Edmonds here this evening on? No, he is not here online or in the room. So I will read his question. Why has the 2023 review of the health and safety policy not taken place? And by what legal authority have the Chief Executive and leader chosen to redact their signatures? There also appears to be no rational reason for redacting the name of the elected member responsible for health and safety matters. Of similar significance, how have the significant elected members' obligations for health and safety been brought to their attention? Leader to respond, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Brian Edmonds. It's almost like you haven't left sometimes. I will just state for the record, I'm myself a qualified health and safety assessor and auditor, and I come from a governance background and I'm familiar with a lot of the detail of this in my professional life. The Council remains committed to ensuring it meets its obligations under Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 and the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations 1999, and its health and safety management arrangements fulfil those legal obligations. Council has a robust health and safety governance arrangement, and these are set out in our health and safety policy. And these arrangements seek to embed health and safety across our authority and are not reliant on a single member of staff. And the Council remains confident that in spite of the current vacancy, and we do have a corporate health and safety vacancy, there are suitable and sufficient persons in post that have sufficient time and resources to fulfil their functions. Now, whilst there has been a delay in reviewing the health and safety policy due to that vacancy, there have been no necessary changes during the 22-23 period. Council has now engaged a health and safety advisor, and one of the priorities is to review that policy to reflect the arrival of the new chief executive and the slight changes to health and safety governance arrangements that have occurred over the last few months. The roles and responsibility of the council officers in respect of health and safety, because as I mentioned, it's not just vested in one individual or one member, are listed in that health and safety policy, which is published on the council website, and the link will be attached to the response. This will be updated in the near future, as I have mentioned. Council does retain a signed copy of the health and safety policy within its records. Signatures have been redacted from the copy published on the website to prevent their fraudulent use by third parties. This is officers protecting both myself and the chief executive. It is agreed that names and dates do not need to be redacted, and that will be corrected with a new version of the policy when it's published. From my point of view, at this point, I think it's long. That ship has long since sailed about my signature being in the public domain. So, from my point of view, I don't personally feel the need for it to be redacted. All elected members are briefed on their health and safety responsibilities during their induction, as I hope Councillor Earwaker will hopefully confirm with me. As leader and co-portfolio holder for governance, if there are any safety matters, I'm briefed immediately, and any health and safety issues of significance are raised to the executive and to myself and my co-portfolio, Councillor Keele. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Our next question comes from Peter Goodwin. Is Peter Goodwin? He is not in the room nor online. If I could just say, this next question is very long. So apologies, everybody, that you're hearing my voice quite so much this evening. It is great that people ask us questions, really good, and we need to encourage that. However, I do think it would be better if they were here to ask them in person and hear the responses in person. So forgive me, I'm now going to read this very long question from Peter Goodwin. With the proposed increase in car park charges, the council seems determined to inflict the most damage on Haslemere High Street shoppers, retail businesses and restaurants. Shoppers using the High Street car park were already charged more than commuters in the Waydown Road car park for the whole charging period. Now commuters face a mere 40p increase for staying all day, with high street shoppers having to pay incremental increases every single hour. 1. The High Street car park is the main car park for the High Street, West Street, Lower Street and High Pavement, the retail and restaurant hub of Haslemere. Many have already moved to shop out of town and in Petersfield with its wider range of shops. So what is the reasoning behind this council decision to impose the highest incremental charges on the main Haslemere East car park used by shoppers and those visiting businesses, solicitors, the banking hub, estate agents, etc., as it shows a clear bias to the Haslemere West retailers, i.e. Marks and Spencer and Tesco with their free car parking? 2. Why have the council imposed a very unfair £2 evening charge in the High Street, which will affect all Town Hall Council and committee meetings and those visiting the restaurants and pubs in Haslemere East? This can only be interpreted as a wish to stifle evening business in Haslemere East in favour of out-of-town pubs and restaurants. So why has this been levied? 3. The fairground car park proposal will force not only commuters, but all those working in the Way Hill shops to park on residential roads. I believe that a car park capacity study found there are adequate spaces available elsewhere, but where? The 100 or so spaces on the fairground site will all be needed by the houses and supermarket. So why has the council totally ignored the fact that Way Hill, from the railway bridge to the Tesco traffic lights, is almost always a traffic roadblock, which these proposals will make far worse? 4. I also question, 1, what will be the cost to the taxpayer of the evening traffic wardens? And 2, what additional budget has Waverley set aside to monitor borough car parks up to 10 p.m? Councillor Fairclough to respond, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'd like to thank Mr Goodwin for his questions, I guess. I'd like to begin by reassuring him that Waverley is committed to supporting all of our high streets. As part of the Council's integrated sustainable transport policy over the next 3 years, we will be reviewing and investing in our car parking infrastructure to make visiting our high streets as easy, as enjoyable and as cost-effective as possible. The incremental changes to the high street car parking tariff equates to 10p rise per hour. This is the first rise since 2021 and is broadly in line with inflation over that 3-year period. We are sympathetic to the fact that many people are struggling with the cost of living crisis, and the last thing that we would want to do is increase the burden on our residents at this time. However, funding from central government continues to fall, while rising costs and increased demand for council services means that we face a £15.2 million budget gap over the next 4 years. Unfortunately, it falls upon Waverley to make some difficult decisions now if we are to safeguard the long-term future of our services, which are relied upon by so many local people. The income generated through parking charges is used to support the management and maintenance of our car parks, but it is also essential to help fund our environmental services like refuse and recycling collections, street cleaning, and maintaining and protecting our wonderful parks and open spaces. Parking charges throughout the borough are based on what we refer to as banding of our car park portfolio. And this is broadly split between town centre car parks and those further out of town, where, as you might expect, there are higher charges in town centre car parks and lower charges out of town in order to encourage use therein. Out of town car parks, such as Waydown, are aimed at attracting longer stay users, and here charges are set accordingly to reflect and indeed encourage those longer stays. Whilst Weyhill does have a shopping area, the High Street car park is Hazelmere's busiest. As a result, the charging tariff strategy for the High Street car park aims actually to maximise vehicle turnover, and this turnover ensures that car park spaces become regularly available for new shoppers. Waverley has no influence on the charges in either the Marks and Spencer or the Tesco car parks in Hazelmere. Mr Goodwin refers to the increased charges in the High Street car park. However, for residents wishing to shop or eat out in the vicinity of Hazelmere High Street, there are in fact alternative parking options with different, lower charges almost adjacent to it. With respect to Petersfield, the car park charge for 1 hour is actually higher than that in Waverley. Petersfield also charges for parking on a Sunday, a policy that Waverley firmly rejected in our last budget. In Hazelmere, evening charges are being trialled in one car park only. The evening charge of £2 is a pilot scheme to understand the impact of such an initiative. As with any pilot scheme, we need comparison with what I will term control car parks that have no charges. Evening charges are not uncommon, as can be seen with neighbouring authorities. It's a fact that car park users in the evening impact the maintenance costs of the car park as much as those using the car parks during the day. And by introducing the notion of evening car park charges as on a pilot scheme, we are merely examining options for an equitable tariff structure across the borough. The existing contract with our parking enforcement team is for a certain number of hours, and we can vary the times of enforcement between our operating times. During the pilot, evening patrols will therefore be carried out at no extra cost. Should the increased patrols be needed in the future, the costs will then be reviewed as part of the new tender. With respect to the fairground proposal in particular, car park usage and the number of spaces required in the Weyhill area going forward will in fact be an integral part of the overall project as required by the local plan part 2. The proposals for the fairgrounds site will ensure parking for all users in the Weyhill area, with pricing designed to give priority to local residents and shoppers, rather than commuters who will be encouraged to use the station car park. It should be noted, and here you'll have to excuse the pun, that this project is at the very start of its journey. I would like to reassure Mr Goodwin that road traffic issues have been noted via a pre-application meeting with the County Highway Authority where no objections were raised. And I'd like to furthermore encourage the Hazelmere community to continue to engage with the project as it progresses. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We come now to agenda item 7, which
May I
is...
rise on a point of order, Madam Mayor?
What is your point of order, Councillor?
Under our procedure rules, a member of the public who asks a question may ask one supplementary question which must arise directly from the question itself or the response provided to the question. This is in our latest procedure rules. I would like to check with the monitoring officer that we perhaps should have given Mrs. Hobson the opportunity to ask a supplementary question if that is indeed the intent of that procedure rule. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I could just check with the councillor, I think you might be referring to the rules that are for consideration this evening. Is that correct? Yes, so they haven't been adopted as yet. So we are still working on the old rules at this point of the meeting, which don't allow for a supplementary question. Thank you.
So we move to agenda item 7, which is questions from members of the council. And we have one question from Councillor Hyman, who I believe is online. May I remind you, Councillor Hyman, that you have no right to vote this evening, nor any right to debate, but you have your right to ask your question. So Councillor Hyman, please ask your question.
That's very kind. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't certain actually that I had the right to ask the question by Zoom, but thanks for confirming that I do. And no, I won't need to participate any further this evening. Although I could have driven over in the time, I was just held up by friendly traffic. And thanks to Ken Reid for his, Councillor Reid earlier for his comments, as well as to you for allowing me into the meeting. If you don't mind, and if members can stand the shock, if we jump down halfway through my question rather than read all of it out. The background is that the March Farnham Board papers indicated that the detailed plans and parametric traffic modelling remain to be completed, despite Surrey Highways having supposedly provided a previous June 2023 Farnham Board meeting with selected results from that modelling. We now find that Surrey and Waverley are already relying on that dubious satisfactory modelling for supposedly meeting our obligations under planning and air quality legislation. So my question is, will Waverley now please agree to meet our obligations under the specified parts of the Environment Act 2021 and due process by requesting and ensuring that Surrey County Council publicly demonstrate their 2019 base and 2025 with FIP parametrics models for Farnham on screen for scrutiny, along with their assumptions and input and output data before any related decisions are made and before works commence, and if not, why not? Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman. Councillor Williams to respond, please. I beg your pardon? I beg your pardon, Tony.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Hyman for his question. As Councillor Hyman is aware, although Waverley is, through the allocation of SIL funding, likely to be a supporter of the Farnham Infrastructure Programme and as such a partner of the programme, the ultimate authority and the ultimate responsibility for the Farnham Infrastructure Programme and the resulting air quality rests with Surrey Highways. As a result, whilst Waverley may request information, Surrey County Council is not obliged to provide it. Waverley officers are working with Surrey County Council officers to ensure a full assessment of the air quality impact of all proposed traffic management measures. And to that end, Waverley officers are meeting with their Surrey counterparts to progress this in the next few weeks. In the meantime, the Surrey County Council Transport Studies team and Atkins have responded to Councillor Hyman's questions as follows, and here I must apologise because I need to read out what Surrey actually said, so apologies if it sounds slightly stilted. The county's strategic transport model, Sintram, was used to estimate demand for the 2025 forecasts of the more detailed parametrics microstimulation models of Farnham, as well as the scheme's air quality assessment. It was developed in accordance with the Department for Transport's transport appraisal guidance. The Sintram modelling completed in June 2023 is now considered to represent a worst case high growth scenario because it is based on outdated Department of Transport forecasts, which forecast higher growth than the latest version and on which no COVID adjustment has been applied. COVID adjustment guidance for this only came out recently, and observed count data shows that this is relevant for Farnham, with observed traffic flows being on average 9% lower than they were in the 2019 during peak times. The Paramix modelling is being worked on daily as part of an ongoing detailed design. However, the Farnham Town Centre Improvement Scheme reflects other issues for the town, such as a high rate of pedestrian accidents in the town centre, the dependence on vehicular travel, where it dominates streets, affecting walking and cycling and leisure activities, and reduces public realm quality and sense of place, therefore worsening noise and air quality, especially in the borough. Narrow and substandard footways, especially on the borough and in Downing Street, which particularly affect those with mobility, visual impairments and families with pushchairs. There is a lack of crossing facilities, servicing vehicles blocking carriageways and footways, poor public realm with street clutter, inconsistent materials, limited rest area outside, and poor setting of heritage/listed buildings. Poor, constrained bus waiting areas with a lack of real-time information. The new Brightwells and Woolmead developments, once they take place, shifting focus east of town centre and creating a need to better connect the new and old centres. It also suffers from poor drainage. The town centre schemes addresses these issues by providing the following solutions. Reduced vehicular traffic in the town centre. Increased walking and cycling in the town centre. Improved pedestrian safety by repurposing lanes and adding signalised and raised crossings. Enhanced bus stops with level boarding, new shelters and real-time information. Improved bus infrastructure expected to attract more users and further reduce the reliance on cars. An improved pedestrian environment with a sense of place and attractiveness. Formalised unloading arrangement into designated bays, therefore discouraging ad hoc carriageway blocking. Greening, suds and rain gardens to improve drainage and biodiversity. Widen footways, especially on the borough, and helping to connect with East Street developments, as well as along Downing Street and in the vicinity of bus stops. Provision of specific loading/parking bays. Improved public realm with reduced street clutter, more seating, cycle parking and consistent and quality materials. Traffic flow alterations to reduce traffic using the gyratory and the borough. And finally, you'll be grateful, improved air quality and noise in the town centre. As with any major scheme, there will be a period of post-scheme monitoring. This will review a range of factors such as air quality and accidents, and will include traffic flows to ensure mitigation measures to deliver the required benefit. The final details of the design for the town centre are still being worked on by Surrey County Council. Once the final design and associated traffic model is completed, Waverley officers have requested that a full air quality assessment with detailed modelling of the potential air quality impacts is provided by Surrey County Council to also be shared with councillors. Waverley officers are currently drafting the annual air quality status report, which is due to go to DEFRA by the 30th of June this year. Once approved by DEFRA, it will be published on the Waverley website. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. That concludes question time. And we come to agenda item number 8, which is the appointment of the Joint Strategic Director of Finance, the Section 151 officer. Leader, would you like to move the recommendation, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am pleased to move the recommendation of the Joint Senior Staff Committee, which in this particular case, I undertook the role of Vice Chair. I believe I have a seconder before I continue.
Delighted to second, Madam Mayor.
And just to update members, we had a unanimous recommendation from the Joint Senior Staff Committee. There have been no material or well-founded objections from either executive at Guildford Borough Council or Waverley Borough Council, or myself or Julia McShane as the two leaders. I very much welcome this appointment. I think this is an excellent appointment for Waverley Borough Council in many ways. I think this is something I'm surprised almost to see happening. I didn't think we'd be able to convince this individual to apply for a permanent role, but I'm very glad that they did. And it was a very, actually, to be fair, I think it was one of the best interview processes I've observed. Reminded me how these things can go, frankly. And I urge you all to support this excellent appointment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Townsend, do you want to speak to second?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would reiterate everything the leader has said. I must admit that I think I do feel we're very lucky to have secured this appointment, and I think that Richard brings absolute wealth of experience, knowledge. He is going to face any challenges. He really is going to embrace that. And the really important thing as well, as which I was really impressed with during the interview, was how he really, and is already doing this, empowering his team as well, and really bringing forward talent as well, which we have got some very talented officers as well. So I am absolutely delighted, to support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Now it's down to anybody who would like to speak. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Well, on a note of harmony, if I may, I too was a part of the process of selection as a leader of the opposition, for which I'm very grateful. I agree the process was robust. I thought that Richard did extremely well in the interview process, and I'm delighted that he has been appointed and has accepted the job. It's a job which has been vacant for some time. Of course, he's been the interim, but it's good to have a permanent appointment. And his breadth of vision, his understanding of the issues, and many of his solutions that he put forward, I was in actually agreement with. So I look forward to continuing to work with Richard. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? No. So I'll read the recommendation. The recommendation for council to approve this evening is that Richard Bates be appointed to the permanent role of Joint Strategic Director of Finance, Section 151 Officer for Guildford and Waverley Borough Councils. No objections were made by either of the two council leaders on behalf of their respective executives. So when the console lights up, you can vote. Don't forget that for is on the left, abstain is in the middle, and against is on the right. Thank you. That was carried unanimously. So we come to agenda item number 9. The new Economic Development Strategy and Action Plan for 2024 to 32. And I call upon Councillor Townsend to speak for this, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I would like to thank the Economic Development team for all their hard work in completing this strategy, which is also supported by a comprehensive action plan outlining our short, medium and long-term measures to achieve this ambitious plan. I would also like to thank the team at Avison Young and Martin Ebbs from Economic Growth Management for his work on the supporting evidence-based data. This council has declared a climate emergency, and we recognise that we need to do things differently for our residents, our businesses and for our environment. We want our economy to thrive, and we need it to work within social and ecological thresholds as outlined within Kate Raworth's Donut Economics. She recognises that for the 21st century, a far bigger goal is needed, meeting the human rights of every person within the means of our life-giving planet. And we recognise that business as usual is simply not an option. And this strategy aims to help to create a flourishing, sustainable and equal economy. Many residents and businesses that we speak to want change and recognise the need to be more sensitive to their impact on the world around them, whilst building thriving businesses. This document sets out our 10-year plan to move towards achieving this ambition. As you can see, small, micro and start-up businesses are the lifeblood of the borough's economy. We recognise the challenges that those businesses face in getting to the next level and surviving beyond the first 5 years. We intend to direct the resources we have to help them to succeed. Waverley is home to an educated, entrepreneurial and creative workforce, focused around our 4 main settlements of Farnham, Godalming, Haslemere and Cranley, all of which have property vacancy rates well below the national average. We heard the great news this evening about the new business occupying 69 High Street in Godalming, as well as, more importantly, opening up the opportunity for affordable and energy-efficient housing in the centre of the town. And I'm also delighted to see 3 new businesses entering Cranley's High Street as well. We have already supported and provided funding for business improvement districts in Farnham, Godalming and Cranley. We will continue to meet with these groups along with our more established chambers of commerce to assist them in achieving their plans, and they are also important partners in our economic development strategy. This strategy also recognises our less visible but equally important rural economy, covering a broad range of sectors from food production and manufacturing to construction and defence. We have already started to join forces with Guildford's established Rural Forum to work more closely with these businesses going forward. Our strategy is based around our Thrive themes, outlined in full on page 6 of the strategy. These are based on some of the work we are already doing around our small business support, growing a green economy, supporting our high streets and improving our commercial space offer, as well as enhancing our infrastructure. We will be working closely across all council services, including with the local plan team, our assets team and procurement, to help to deliver these themes and have set clear targets to measure our success. Within each of our Thrive themes are our more targeted game changer programmes, which promote Waverley as a distinctive place and based on our identified strengths of a green, digitally connected, creative and regenerated rural economy. We are already working with UCA in Farnham, and I recently attended the launch of their trailblazing regional initiative, Pixel Rise, which aims to create a thriving ecosystem in gaming and to promote creativity, innovation and inclusivity. I am delighted that Professor Sophie Smith, who is the Director of the School of Games and Creative Technology, will be joining us for the Guildford and Waverley Business Question Time. This event's taking place on Monday, June the 3rd, and I hope to see some of you there. The event will be hosted and chaired by Professor Amelia Hadfield, who's the Associate Vice President at the University of Surrey. We recognise that we are delivering a new vision and a step change for our local economy based on donut economics. This approach to delivering sustainable economic development needs to be embedded across our council services and its members, working together at all levels as one council to achieve this and building strong connections with our stakeholder groups and partners who are critical to the successful delivery of this strategy and its action plan, which I am very proud to present to this council. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And do you have a seconder?
Pleased to second, Madam Mayor, and I'll reserve my comments later.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I would like to commend Catherine Knight and her team for the detailed work she's put into this report and her dedication to ensure businesses in Waverley gets the attention it needs. As a small business owner and as a Farnham bid representative, I've seen firsthand how hard she works in helping businesses and aiding communication of the business community within Waverley. As a Farnham representative, I read with interest the section called Creative Waverley, which focuses on Farnham becoming a creative centre for the borough by working with partners such as UCA, the Maltings, the New Ashgate Gallery and Farnham Town Council to encourage our world-class artists and craft professionals to use underused public and retail space. And I've seen firsthand where craft pop-up shops created a real buzz in Lion and Lamb Yard specifically, and brought spaces back into life in our town centres. I applaud the aspiration in the report to create an additional 1,000 jobs over the next 5 years, and an increase in 2,000 extra businesses in Waverley over 10 years. But I also note with caution in the report, 45.5% of businesses in Waverley fail within 5 years. And as a local business owner, I know the pressures on running a small business. And it's just not whether your business is just popular and successful, but it's whether you can make it profitable enough to survive and expand. The one thing I would highlight is the lack of affordable accommodation in Waverley. Housing is 16.5 times higher than average earnings, more than any neighbouring borough. The greatest threat I saw to business growth is where are these employees going to live? So this needs to be at the forefront of Waverley's decision-making over the next 5 years if this action plan is going to succeed. I would be delighted to recommend it. Thank you.
Certainly, as the portfolio holder for environment and sustainability, I mean, I would very much welcome this strategy. I congratulate Liz and Catherine Knight and the economic development team on the development of what is a bold and imaginative strategy. And I think actually for the first time, we are recognizing that the traditional economic development practice and developer-led generation are failing to address the economic challenges of the present time. Economic development is not just about supporting businesses in the local community, whoever they might be, whatever their corporate practices, whatever the social impact, whatever the carbon footprint. And although it is challenging to implement the kind of strategy that we are outlining, it is right. It is based upon a notion of community wealth building. It is a people-centered approach to local economic development, directing wealth back into the local community, placing control and benefits back into the local economy. And when we read the Economic Development Action Plan, I certainly felt inspired. Now titled Waverley's Thriving and Green Economy. And, you know, there's 6 strands there, aren't there? Turbocharging our small business community, harnessing the green economy, refining our high streets and urban centres, improving our commercial spaces, valuing our people, and enhancing our physical and digital infrastructure. I believe this is creative, it is imaginative, it is inspiring, and I am delighted to support this strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Follister, do you want to do your seconding now? Is that?
Yeah, I'm happy to go in the order that members have registered.
Okay.
So.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, this is a bit of a curate's egg. There are some bits I like and there are some bits that I'm not quite so keen on. I have to say it's very interesting to read Kate Rayworth's donut approach. Kate Rayworth, of course, is an Oxford academic. She's actually the sister of Sophie Rayworth that we all see and love on BBC television. So yes, it's an interesting read, and I take note of the points that Steve Williams makes and Liz makes in terms of our green and sustainable needs. But on the other hand, things are changing in our high street. The traditional ways, I mean, Steve Williams made comment about the traditional economy as failing. Well, in many ways, the high street traders and so on and so forth are very challenged because we tend to shop online. Amazon and all the rest of it is going extremely strongly. And the whole style of shopping has changed, and that presents great challenges to those who continue to operate in the high street. And of course, we're seeing in our towns now a trend towards much more in the way of services. The number of, I think there are now 21 establishments in Godalming High Street that serve coffee every day, which is extraordinary. On the other hand, pubs are diminishing and are closing. So the whole style of our high street is changing. And I'm not sure whether this document has captured that in the way that I think perhaps that it should have done. I thought the EGM document was extremely interesting. That's the evidence base, which was a long document. That was, I thought, a good read. There were some good points made in that. For instance, on page 163, on retaining key businesses, and that I didn't see that reflected in the way that I would have expected in the strategy and in the action plan. So I think there are some good parts. I'm not sure that increasing car parking charges by the scale that we have over the last year is consistent with a good economic strategy. I'm sure others will disagree with that, but that is my view. And I'm also very uncertain as to whether selecting and acquiring one or two shops and premises, for instance, in Godalming, like 69 High Street, and spending too much public money on them is the right approach to regeneration. And I read with great interest what's going to happen to this building, and I shall await those plans with considerable interest. So, as I say, there are some good bits and there are some bad bits. Of course, we need a development strategy. By the way, I would like to say that I welcome the focus on the rural economy. I'm a director of Surrey Hills Enterprises, which is a member-led organisation, 250 small businesses. And I think that that would be very useful to establish that connection there and improve the links that we have to help in the way of driving the rural economy. So, as I said, I will probably abstain in the vote since that I've got some reservations, but I understand the thrust. And I'm glad that we are going to have some sort of development strategy going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Right, there are several hands. Councillor Merriweather first, and then.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wholly support this, and for me, without wishing to argue with Councillor Martin, I think the importance of this document is that it reminds us that, as important as the high street is, we have bigger fish to fry in Waverley. We have a health sector, we have an education sector that we need to support. The UCA is the largest single economic entity in the borough, and we ignore it at our peril. We should support it. As for our interventions in the High Street, Councillor Martin knows very well that we bought 69 High Street to provide housing, affordable housing for the workforce that Councillor Murray quite rightly pointed out we desperately need for our businesses to employ and provide whatever it is that needs to be provided. So I'm very, very happy with this. I'm very glad that it addresses the economic development for all sectors within the borough, and it has my full support.
Thank you. Councillor Spence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too very much welcome this paper, particularly the emphasis and priority that it's putting on the Green Waverley theme, because I think climate change is our biggest existential threat and it impacts everything and everyone. So at a time when the government is rowing back on some of its commitments, it's vital that this council steps up its activities to promote and support green initiatives, and this strategy sets that out. I also welcome the section on digital connectivity. This is a huge issue in some of the villages, and particularly in Beacon Hill in my ward, where the lack of mobile and broadband connectivity is not only impacting residents, but having a big or detrimental impact on the few shops and businesses that we have left. However, where infrastructure work is happening, there's a great danger that it is creating a two-tier system, whereby some providers will connect, say, village centres, but leave outlying streets and homes and businesses as digital deserts. So I hope that the council will be supporting initiatives that give entire villages comprehensive coverage and facilitate particularly the use of the gigabyte voucher scheme when it is finally extended to our area. And then finally, I also note that much of this action plan is dependent upon grant and loan funding. Councillor Williams earlier spoke of the successes that the council has had in securing funding. But I also note in the paper, I think there's only 1.4 full-time employees on the economic development team. So if we are serious about converting this worthy vision into real action, we must invest in this team and take on people who are really experienced in putting together applications and securing monies for the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Thank you. One moment. Councillor Coburn, would you like to go first?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I just really want to make a small point and thank very much the officers, because this document, and you all know how wide and thick it is and how long it is and detailed it is, didn't reach the Overview and Scrutiny Committee until certainly no more than 2 days ahead of the meeting, if not less than that. And the committee services will know I was not best pleased, because when you get a document the size of that, it's impossible. You just cannot do it justice. And the word is considered, but it came out, it may have come out on the Friday before the Tuesday. I have a feeling some of it didn't get to us until the Monday, but committee services will check that. Having said that, those of us that did get it, we put in as much time as we could. We have busy lives apart from the council. But Catherine Knight, is she around anywhere? I have to take my hat off to her, because she came along. She'd been working her socks off to get the document finished, apart from anything else. But she came along and patiently took us through that document. We couldn't do the whole document. It was just impossible. We concentrated a little bit on the management plan. We looked at the aspiration, but there's no way that that Overview and Scrutiny Committee could give consideration, which is the word that's used. So I just really want to make a plea, please, for documents to be given to Overview and Scrutiny in good time, so that those of us who do want to look at every single word actually get the opportunity to do so. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Atkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm a huge supporter of economic development, but I think we all will recognise that in reality, local councils, chambers of commerce don't change the economic success of an area. The businesses do. So when I was reading through the document, I was just a little bit concerned to see that the stakeholders consulted didn't involve big businesses, big employers, small businesses, landlords, all the people who actually can make change locally. And I think moving forward, as this is a working document, I think it would be really sensible to do that, so that together a collaborative vision can be created. And more importantly than bits of paper, this is translated and fleshed out into the how we do things.
Thank you. Councillor Deuce.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm delighted to support this economic development plan. I'm very excited about it. I'm glad that it's grounded in donut economics, which is something that's been mentioned from a sustainability angle. But also I'm excited in terms of supporting younger people accessing employment and the ability and the potential of entrepreneurship. I've noticed in my professional role at Godalming College that fewer students are applying directly to university. I think part of that is the economic situation and the uncertainty, and more are investing in their own businesses whilst they're already studying because of the scope of social media. So I'm excited to offer my services to the executive to help in that way, and to also think about, in light of Councillor Murray's point, appropriate premises and ways in which perhaps local education organisations, given its percentage of local economy, can support with that.
Thank you. Councillor Follows and then Councillor Townsend. Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a sort of full circle for me because one of the first sessions I had working with other parties was on donut economics. In that session, I recall working with a number of individuals around me who are now councillors several years later. And so it's really excellent to see a strategy come before us that takes a broader view of economics and one that has a wider vision of what constitutes both value and values, in a way that members will see again in the near future as a pillar of our refresh of the wider corporate strategy as well. I do want to say thank you to our officers, but also to Councillor Townsend, who I know has personally had to put a great deal of effort into this over the last few years, over the last few months, to get it to be what we have seen as an executive as our vision of economic development. And I welcome this evidence-based strategy because the evidence in itself that was collected, I think, is actually incredibly informative about the profile of our borough. It's not just doing the things that are just counting how many houses people have or what type of house they live in and all those sort of standard metrics. It's a wider profile. And I don't know about any of the rest of you, but I learned a lot from this process, and things like the health and education sector employment levels and requirements are something that I think we just need to take note of in its own right. There's lots of really useful information in there. It is an evidence base that considers the whole community and the types of economic profile across the borough, and it recognises also, and I think this is particularly important in Waverley, the unique character and contribution of our towns and parishes where appropriate, and where necessary leverages Waverley as a borough to facilitate things that our towns and parishes cannot. The action plan is realistic but challenging and obviously needs to take into account the reality of the local government financing situation we find ourselves in, as well as the national picture. But it's also trying to do this in a growth in a truly sustainable manner. By that I mean growth that isn't at any cost, and it isn't growth that benefits at the expense of the many and only benefits the few. I mean, high streets and village centres are changing, and services and events in those high streets are crucial. And Councillor Martin, I think Godalming has, a colleague of mine was just saying, 21 places that serve coffee. Farnham, I think, actually has even more than that. And nobody is more surprised than me as how they all stay in business simultaneously. I have to say, I genuinely am baffled sometimes how that occurs. Well, as I was going to say, there might be some other input on the other side there. But high streets do have to change, and they are, I think, in the main, but they do need a little bit of help because legislation to support that change has actually been quite lackluster. You've seen nearly no change in how business rates work. There's no real taxation system for some of the online giants that are driving the shopping online trends. So we do have to give a little bit of help where government aren't. And Councillor Merriweather makes a point that I was going to make, and Councillor Murray started with it. Housing is crucial at a level that is affordable because otherwise people can't actually work here. And however big those businesses are and however much they want to contribute, if nobody can afford to live in the area to employ them in the first place, they will struggle. And it is one of the main reasons there aren't such big businesses in Waverley is because they cannot employ people because they can't live here at a reasonable rate. Members, I'm very pleased to second this, and I have no doubt the other matters will be addressed by Councillor Townsend, and I want to again thank officers and Councillor Townsend for all of their hard work on this. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So I see no other speakers. So would you like to sum up, please, Councillor Townsend?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Absolutely, affordable housing is so important, and the frustration as being planning portfolio holder as well is that we have about 5,500 homes outstanding, waiting to be built, or in the local plan, waiting to be built, and we need developers to build those. And I know I've been in this chamber so many times saying we have no carrot or stick to do that at this moment in time. We need government to step up and to create the environment wherein those houses are actually built. We all know the standard method isn't working. The way that the government calculates housing targets is not working. It's completely flawed, and that needs to change. And hopefully moving forward that will change, and we will get more delivery of affordable housing. And if the right to buy changes as well, maybe we as a council can deliver more affordable housing, which we're completely committed to, and we have an affordable housing strategy. I think that talking about Councillor Martin, talking about changing high streets, this is nothing new. I mean, I was reading about this sort of 10 years ago, how high streets were going to become leisure hubs, you know, service-based. So we have absolutely thought about that within this economic development strategy. You know, talking about business rates. Oh my goodness, wouldn't we want to hold on to more of those business rates? So our businesses that pay those business rates, we can invest that in their areas and we can do far more innovative things. But again, that requires a change of government. And that is a thing. We need to be very aware of the role that we can play. And I'm very aware of the role we can play. You know, raising car parking charges will give me an alternative, Councillor Martin. I definitely would consider it for income raising, you know, absolutely. We have got a very small economic development team. The collaboration with Guildford offers huge opportunities across our economic development areas, separate areas, because they're very dominated by Guildford town centre. So the reason why, Councillor Atkins, we're not talking about those big businesses is that we have to recognise our sphere of influence. Surrey is doing those big businesses. We are working closely with Surrey and their economic development team. We're not duplicating their work. It's a waste of money, it's a waste of time, it's a waste of effort. What we are doing is concentrating on our core businesses, small, micro, start-up businesses that we can influence, that we can help. And we will work with Surrey on those bigger businesses. But that is their bag and that is what they are doing. So there's no point of us not collaborating on those points. I think as well, I note Councillor Coburn's point, and absolutely my apologies. You know, we were working to the wire on this and therefore making changes and we got it to you. I know I would have much preferred that you had more time to look at it, absolutely. I'd like to thank Councillor Deuce for your offer. Absolutely love to get together to discuss that. Also as part of the skills working party for the exec working group, you know, definitely want to look at where we can create those hubs, those spaces as well within our towns or wherever actually. So it is important. It is so important that we work within our capacity as a borough council, but we also work within the capacity of our planet and also work for our residents, and not a few of our residents, but as many of our residents as we can. So I am so proud of this strategy. I'm proud that this executive allowed this strategy to progress and develop. I think that shows the real commitment to climate change that we have committed ourselves to and to the climate emergency. And if I haven't covered anything like connectivity, obviously, as highlighted by Councillor Spence, that is a big issue. Again, we have been working with Surrey on that. I was really disappointed when they dropped the Fibers Fine project, I can't tell you, but we have to work with what we've got. We will work with them. We are looking at that, and I'm quite happy to discuss it further with Councillor Spence as well later on. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. So I will read the recommendation. The recommendation for Council to approve this evening is that Council notes the adoption by the Executive of the new Economic Development Strategy and Action Plan 2024 to 2032. So when your console lights, please vote. I beg your pardon? Okay. Do we note? Thank you. Take that bit out then. So we come to agenda item 10. There are paper copies of the updated report for this item, and its better labelled exempt appendices have been printed and are available on your desks. Councillor Merriweather, would you like to move the recommendation, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd love to. Councillor Murray's had enough, but quite obviously we're ready. It's quite serendipitous that this item flows so well from the discussion that we've just had about economic development, and especially Councillor Murray's comments about housing. The report for the Fairground Development Project is on pages 241 to 328 of your pack, which I hope is now clearer with the magnificent updated labelling of the exempt annexes this time. The fairground site is allocated for mixed-use development in our local plan, Part 2, which was adopted only just over a year ago in March 23, and which was the product of over 6 years intensive assessment, volumes of evidence, thorough consultation, debate, hearings, and official examination. LPP2 is, of course, the so-called daughter document of LPP1, which was adopted in 2018 following a similarly rigorous democratic process. The fairground is currently used as an informal car park and is popular because parking is free of charge. This is neither a fair nor a sustainable use of a valuable council asset, valuable council land. And that status quo is not an option, whatever the outcome of this process, especially as so many spaces are used by long stay commuters at the expense of local short stay shoppers and residents. As we've seen, not least from questions from members of the public earlier here tonight, this is a concern, and that's also evident in the LPP2 site allocation itself, which makes some quite specific reference to the provision of parking as well as other development criteria. I'm genuinely delighted to recommend that we advance to the next stage of the project, which represents the commitments made in LPP2 and fulfills many of the priorities in our corporate strategy and does both in a patient and responsible manner. The report describes the considerable work that our officers have done to define viable options capable of delivering those LPP2 and strategic outcomes on the fairground site. All that plus a much needed new community hub on part of the underutilised Waydown Road car park. The report presents the cases for 5 options that survived initial feasibility assessment and recommends we pursue a mixed use development of retail space and 32 residential homes at a Waverley rent mix of 70 and 65% of market rent. The recommended option would be self-funding. It'll pay for itself, with the retail element generating valuable revenue income for the general fund and with the residential homes operated within our ring-fenced housing revenue account. That the scheme is self-funding is significant, also because it means that it does not affect or limit our ability to buy or build council homes elsewhere in the borough. None of the other options, to the extent that they're even permitted, either in planning terms or under current Public Works Loan Board regulations, would be expected to perform better when assessed financially as a whole against these strategic deliverables. Those other options included the sale of the residential element of the development to a private developer on the open market. But to sell the site would mean losing control of the design of the development, if not the affordable housing altogether. To do so would generate capital, not revenue, restricted capital funds for the general fund, but not for social housing in our HRA. So, were we to sell the site, we would still have to deliver alternative new HRA homes, but that would only be possible to the extent that opportunities actually exist, and even they might not be in Hazelmere or to the quality we aspire to, and they might be dispersed inefficiently. The report also describes where exactly we are in this process. We are transitioning from feasibility to design. We are not seeking approval to actually start construction work because there will be no detailed plans to work from or designs until we've selected a development partner and started that phase. This report sets out the objectives and the parameters, financial and otherwise, on which to procure that development partner and instruct independent professional experts to proceed with that work. And it is because we're contemplating this valuable and sensitive, competitive commercial procurement process that so much of the feasibility analysis we have done has to be kept confidential in order to protect the integrity of the procurement process. This is an absolute necessity in the interests of the council and our tax and rent payers. More broadly, we do also have to recognise that many of the deliverables, especially in the LPP2 criteria, concerning things like on-street car parking, traffic flow, are not actually within Waverley's powers or control. And we will be working with others, including our colleagues on Surrey County Council and Hazelmere Town Council, to deliver the very best that we can. There will no doubt be other concerns and conflicting, if not competing, priorities to be dealt with as we progress through the design stage and then into consultation before we even get to a planning application. And it's the future stages of the project that will identify and hopefully resolve or mitigate them too. Engagement and consultation on top of that which already informed the local plan will be a key part of the pre-planning process. And can I also stress, again, that the construction phase of the development cannot and will not commence without further approvals from the executive and this council. I'd like to record my thanks to the officers for all of their hard work and professionalism on this project, including over several very difficult years, and for bringing to us truly deliverable and sustainable options that are within both the letter and the spirit of the local plan and our corporate strategy. So I commend the recommendations to the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Merriweather. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Fairclough, would you like to speak now or reserve your right?
I'd like to speak now, if that's
Thank you.
okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And indeed, if I may echo Mark's final comments, thank you to the team that has put this proposal together. This, for me, is an exciting, an ambitious and a well-considered proposal. One that reflects many of the council's stated objectives, many of which we've heard again tonight. Economic development, affordable social housing in the right location, a better utilisation of council assets, and the provision of a new community asset. This is a very well-rounded proposal and the recommendations are sound. I am delighted to second them. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers? Councillor Weldon.
Thank you. A couple of simple points. No. Yes. Okay. Thank you. First of all, yes, I absolutely support the recommendation. It's an important proposal with a number of benefits, but I want to just draw your attention, please, to begin with, to one very simple error in the document. Right on the front page, line 3, ward affected, Hazelmere West. That's not entirely correct. There are 2 wards affected. Hazelmere, the fairground site itself is in Hazelmere West. The other 2 parts that are affected, the Wayland car park and the youth campus, fall into Hazelmere East, which is my ward. So I'm very much affected. And it is affected not only because it is physically in my ward, but also to the extent that there may be overflow parking onto the streets. That very much is in my area. So please, it needs to be recognised that this affects Hazelmere West and Hazelmere East. I don't want to get into the detail of the report. There are many, many features, but I do want to stress as hard as I can the point already made by Councillor Merriweather. The status quo, leaving it as an unmade free parking, is simply not acceptable. It's not absolutely unacceptable on financial and on climate grounds. The problem that we have is that, yes, there is a lot of parking, a lot of people using it. A lot of those people are using it only because it is free, and many of those people are coming in from out of town. We know from the work that was done in preparation for the Haslemere Neighbourhood Plan that some of those commuters are coming in from as far afield as Chichester. That is not acceptable, and we need to make it very, very clear. I know some years ago, before I was a councillor myself, even a town councillor, I attended a Haslemere town meeting where there was a lot of controversy about what was then a proposal to take away the common land designation and swap it for somewhere else. And the motivation, the reason given to us at that stage was precisely that we wanted to pave it and pay for parking. So this is a long-standing decision. It's not a new idea to suddenly start charging parking. And the absolutely crucial point when we start doing a proper parking need survey is to differentiate between parking need for residents and simple demand for free parking from everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you. We have quite a list. I'll add you. Councillor Atkins, you're next.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, I come from a working class background. My mother could barely afford to feed us. Our housing was substandard, and I am a social mobility success story due to hard work, innovation, and a burning desire to never waste money. I love our borough. I want to provide as much affordable housing as possible, and I am passionate about improving economic development in the area. On so many occasions, I have questioned the merits of our investment and development projects because of significant cost overruns, overpaying for sites, and unevolved business cases. And, in my professional opinion, a lack of vision in maximising our valuable asset base. So this evening, I want to ask, why are we considering spending 280,000, let alone committing 21 million this evening? I understand the requirements of CCPR and CPR 2015, but we are not even at the point where we could possibly procure a development partner. For what? In ONS, I requested the answers to a series of questions that have neither been answered in writing or during the fairground briefing. These questions included how a proposed scheme that costs more than it's worth, even before the inclusion of a development partner, who's clearly not going to do this for free, meets our strategic objectives and can be deemed financially viable. How can we attribute just £6,500 value to an important development site, and how we can preempt a supermarket-led scheme with historic data and no economic master plan? I'm sorry, but it's all currently pie in the sky. I know the textbook replies. So tonight, I am going to moot something a little different. We have learnt this evening from our economic development strategy that we lack highly flexible, lower-cost business space. We know that we are losing businesses and jobs, and that some of the reasons for this include no register for land for potential investors to see, an over-focus on housing delivery to the detriment of business, and a lack of courage to engage with investors, evidenced by the loss of a potential investor who was looking for 80,000 square foot of office space locally because he parked in the wrong bay at the council car park. I'm suggesting innovative, fresh discussions with potential anchor businesses that go together with the residential, undertaken by officers and our consultants, and subsequently a planning consultant to work up the right scheme. I am suggesting the right people to have the right conversations and do this in the right order, which would cost about 50 grand. When we have a solid scheme and a properly costed plan, then it should be brought back to full council. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result hasn't worked so well for nearly 1 in 10 councils in England who have warned they will go bust in the next 12 months, primarily due to bad investment decisions. I suggest we stop the tail wagging the dog. We don't approve 21 million of spend based on 4-year-old unquantified data, and we look at this as a game changer programme site. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rubini.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, as we've heard, this site was in fact common land, which was exchanged by the previous Conservative administration for commercial reasons. And it still looks like a lump of common land. It's just sitting there with gravel. And unfortunately, of course, because there's no charge on that car park, then the commuters get it for nothing. Now, what do commuters bring in to Hazelmere or Waverley? Very, very little. They come along, they park, they use the train, and they go away again. So I'm sorry, I cannot support the continued use of free support for commuters in that area. Now, yes, I agree we do need a lot of research on what is required for local partners. I am assured that we are going to use the parking space that we have, firstly for that commercial development, and of course for the very, very much needed social and affordable housing in our area of Hazelmere. We only have 4 brownfield sites in Hazelmere. That's it. And I'm time and time again fed up with going to planning. And of course, what land there is, developers come in, and then unfortunately, we demand an amount of affordable housing, and they come back with a viability study that doesn't allow it. So in fact, we get very, very little housing of affordable nature in the centre of our towns. And it's not just Hazelmere, it's right across. So we have an opportunity that I want to grasp to help our local people to have social or affordable housing in the centre of Hazelmere. Because let's face it, it is. It's by the railway station, it's by Way Hill, and it's a short walk to the town. So not only that, we have this opportunity for a new youth centre. Hazelmere hasn't had a new youth centre. We got handed some years previously a run-down old building that even then wasn't fit for purpose. It's still not fit for purpose. What is the point of shoveling money into that? We need a new one. And this gives us that opportunity to actually go across the road and build a brand new youth centre that our youth deserve. They've had nothing. Let's give them something, please. I get very jealous of other areas that have got this sort of opportunity, whereas Hazelmere seems to miss out. What can I say? I think this is the best opportunity that Hazelmere's had for years. As far as charging is concerned, it has to be charged, partly because of what you heard earlier this evening. We need the money from car parks. Free is not something that we can do anymore. And this is going to be put to such good use that I am 100% behind it, and I want to see it built. So please, all the people that are trying to create problems, and that's the word I use, in traffic and parking, we are looking at those hard. We must do our research, and it will be done. But these are only problems. We can overcome problems. What we need is to make sure that we build the future for Hazelmere, because at the moment we are not achieving it. So I would, like others, like to thank our officers very much for actually presenting this tonight and in the past. I've known about it for some 3-4 years or more, and the officers have been working very hard to bring together this jigsaw so that it is viable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Rubini. I have a list of 6 other speakers, which I'll read so that you know 7. One moment. I'll just do 3 at a time then. Councillor Coburn, followed by Councillor Nicholson, followed by Councillor Keane. Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I'm very sorry to disagree with the Hazelmere councillor on a Hazelmere issue, but I actually do not like what's proposed here, and I haven't liked it for several years, including conversations I had with Graham Clark, who used to be the finance officer here. So And the reason is, let me just make it very clear, I don't think there should be free parking there. I do think there should be affordable housing there. I'm not against any of that at all. I did work in Haslemere, by the way, before you think I don't know anything at all about it, for many years. And I certainly know all the roads between Farnham and Haslemere. My reason I question this is because, as Councillor Rubini says, we go to planning meeting after planning meeting, and every time there's a Haslemere site, we moan that we cannot develop it for one reason or another. And we also have the issue, as Councillor Rubini says, of sometimes the affordable homes dropping out. I think this is a missed opportunity here. I think we could build a slum, I really do, and I just don't like to see sort of supermarkets with flats over them. I just don't. Now, that may be a personal thing, and I apologise if it's going to be the Taj Mahal in Haslemere, but I don't think this is what is meant by placemaking and by putting in beautiful form of homes. I just don't think it's the right thing for Haslemere. I think we should be maximising the residential on that site. I've always thought so, so I'm sorry, I just can't be changed on that. I can understand you want some more money, I can understand all of that. I'm just thinking about Haslemere. And I think what Haslemere needs is the maximum number of really nice affordable homes on that site. I really do. In terms of youth provision, what's proposed, Councillor Rubini, the reason I also don't approve of that is because it's supposed to be, is it not, a community hub. Now, I was involved with the Farnham Youth Project many, many years ago, and it was a disaster, an absolute disaster. It was run by a couple of well-meaning elderly ladies, but it didn't reach out to young people. And the young people it didn't reach out to were the ones that are hard to get. 13, 14-year-olds, they will walk in and do a planned activity. Kids, when they get over that age, they just DOS. I mean, my son still is in his 40s and he can't sit on a sofa. He's always got one leg over the back, whatever. You know, I mean, they are a sort of slightly different breed, the 15 to 18-year-olds, but they're a very valuable breed and they need a space where they can actually do what they want to do. When we changed the Farnham Youth Project to 40 Degrees, which was the name chosen by those young people, when we started decorating it in the way that they wanted it decorated and their taste was impeccable, then we ended up with a vibrant youth centre. So I am worried that this community hub is going to exclude the very young people that actually in Haslemere probably need more chasing up and care than some of the other ones. So from my point of view, I'm just doing it from the heart here. I'm not doing it from the finance point of view. I'm doing it from Haslemere. I'm doing it from a planning point of view. As soon as we have a planning document, it's out of date. We know that. Planning's a snapshot in time. But what we have got to do now is build beautiful. That is what we're supposed to be doing. We are supposed to be building lovely places for people to live in. And that's what I'd like to see on this site. And I'm sorry, I don't see a supermarket as part of that. I can see the financial aims, but I cannot see that it's going to add much to the character and the housing situation in Haslemere. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I'll be fairly brief because the points have been very clearly made. I would ask people to look at the project description on page 261, and I think that really tells us what we want. Increased affordable housing in Haslemere and retained by the HRA, enhanced commercial retail and employment offer, make better use of undeveloped town land, and secure a long-term commercial tenants, plus an improved community hub. A lot of good things in here, which is certainly worthwhile proceeding with.
One moment, Councillor Nicholson. I believe you're speaking from the exempt papers.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Is that okay? You've said. Okay. I'll read the next few. We have Councillor Keane next, then Councillor Barker-Lomax, Councillor Austin, Councillor Follows and Councillor Palmer. So let's go to Councillor Keane, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, first of all, I'd like to assure Councillor Coburn that I would not like to see slum buildings in Haslemere, and I don't believe that Waverley would ever build them to that degree. I'm very, very excited about this scheme. I think Haslemere people need housing, and as Councillor Rubini said, we only have 4 sites. We've got to make the most of them. This area has been a dead area for just people to park up, catch train and go, as has been said. I've been a resident of Haslemere for 74 years, so I know very well that that area has never been used apart from a fair and a circus for many, many years, and it deserves better. So I think this is a very exciting project. And the shoppers and the businesses would benefit, because if we can give them the parking without the commuters, all right, they'd have to pay, but we have expressed as Haslemere councillors that we would want to see a reduced rate for the shoppers locally and for the businesses in order for it to be sustainable. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the community hub, and we've talked about this being a youth community hub. Something, as has been said, we have not had for years, and we have tried to do something for our youth, but we can't without a building, and that is where we need to focus. We have to have a building so that we can get young people in off the streets. And as Councillor Coburn said, if you do it properly and if the kids are involved in the decor and what have you, you can get them into a centre, but you've got to have that centre to do it. So I'm really proud of what the officers have done, and I thank them very much for that. They are keeping Haslemere Town Council in the loop, and I would love to see this actually come to fruition quite quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barker-Lomax.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I welcome the planned new housing. However, some constituents have written to state their concerns about whether the proposal would force current commuters onto residential roads. The papers make reference to a car park study. When can we expect to see that, please?
I'm sure that will come in the summing up. Okay. So the next speaker is Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to see development of this site and plans for a new Haslemere Youth Hub, but I have serious concerns. The administration has decided upon a mixed-use food store plus residential format, but we have seen no convincing evidence of need, of retail demand, of viability, just generalisations and very historic data. This format has taken shape to satisfy the requirements for an income stream for the General Fund and to increase social housing stock for the Housing Revenue Account. But Haslemere has 3 supermarkets already. So, firstly, I don't believe that a 4th supermarket is helping the high street or local businesses or the local economy. The Haslemere Neighbourhood Plan says the community consultation produced a strong vote, 44% in favour of creating a new community-focused development on this site. Now, the Haslemere community boards are widely talking about a Lidl or an Aldi type format. Does this achieve what the people of Haslemere voted for? We've asked for evidence on multiple occasions which would demonstrate what could be provided on this site, a massing study which we know has been undertaken by WBC. This has not been provided to us. What about options, including commercial space, resiting the youth club on the site, or providing more housing, more green community space? This site was originally allocated for 55 units. Wouldn't 55 social or affordable homes be better? So we're being asked to approve 21.4 million budget, substantial costs of 280k, and using out-of-date market comparables, values and costs. The appraisals apply inflation shockingly to 4-year-old historic data. This approach is completely wrong. This is wrong methodology and does not reflect current market conditions. Yields applied are very keen and in addition have moved at least 0.75% since the date of the development appraisal in the exempt papers. It seems once again value for money is not prioritised by this administration. I've got some other issues to flag. Once again, no site value is attributed in the calculations, massively and falsely inflating the appraisals. Waverley have assumed vacant possession of this site, but delivery of vacant possession will in reality be complex and take many years. It is good Waverley proposed to go down the route of a development manager, but costs for this are about 4% of the build cost, and they're not included in the calculation assumptions. Waverley has extended the life of cash flows by decades beyond UK market norm payback time periods in order to make them work. Including a supermarket operator to suit the needs of the general fund is the tail wagging the dog. This may tick a box for Waverley accounting, but it neglects what is right for Haslemere Town. So let's just quickly turn to parking. Both Aldi and Lidl have stated requirements. They need 100 plus dedicated parking spaces. Only Lidl has actually got a live requirement for Haslemere right now. I checked. These type of operators rarely commit to being developers of social housing mixed-use sites. So this development will need 132 spaces dedicated minimum just for the food store and the residential. The LPP2, as Mark Merriweather has just stated, requires no loss of parking. So we requested the parking study. We have not received it. I am concerned Haslemere residents will be inundated with cars parked on residential streets, and this does not comply with LPP2. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Follows, Councillor Palmer, Councillor Williams, I have next. Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I recall visiting the site for the first time a number of years ago, and there is clearly a very good reason why this is in the Haslemere Neighbourhood Plan and in our local plan. And incidentally, I remember on that day, I was talking to an individual who came over to see what all the fuss was about, and he was a commuter from Chichester who had parked in there for free and used Haslemere train station. I'm sure that one piece of anecdotal evidence wasn't the only one. Now, I cannot do anything right now other than share the eternal frustration of Councillor Fabrini on the subject of viability assessments. And I've actually tried to explain this concept to non-councillors who I think are quite rightfully baffled by something so atrociously skewed towards developers at the expense of the community in terms of affordable housing, infrastructure, or both. And without wishing to generate a wave of people making declarations of the same order, Councillor Atkins, I'm also from a working class background. But forgive me, did I basically just hear you say that you can bring in some of your mates to deal with this for 50k? Because that hardly seems like an appropriate comment for somebody to make in such a chamber, bypassing all reasonable due process and evidence gathering that we're obliged to do, not just as a reasonable set of people, but as a local authority by law. And Councillor Austin and Councillor Atkins, the level to which that you are keen to suspend the realities of the local government world, a world that your party and its colleagues have created so effectively over the past decade, is frankly staggering. Councillor Coburn, we aren't talking about a specific design or voting on a specific design, and I suspect when the time comes that will be an extremely thorough session of the planning committee when that happens. I would suggest, not just to Councillor Coburn, but to all members, to consider taking a visit to Oxford Ridge and the housing that we've created up there, housing that considers the whole person, the build quality, how it was built, energy provision, all of those things. And actually, I would say in a fairly good design across the board. It is my hope that we're seeking to achieve something of a similar design and function in Haslemere. Youth provision. Godalming Town Council has been running a really successful model of youth provision following the utter departure of Surrey County Council from this space over the last few years. And I know there have been discussions between Godalming Town Council and Haslemere Town Council about sharing our learning. And actually, I agree, Councillor Coburn, with the point you made. If you're not actually engaging with young people on this properly, it fails fast. And actually, the model that we've been developing in Godalming, effectively giving that over to a proper youth service leader, professionals, because at the end of the day, volunteers' time is A, precious, and B, diminishing, and we can't rely on volunteers to provide all the public services that have been cut. You do have to step up as a town council and think about how you're going to do that. And I can certainly commit right here, right now, that Waverley will help Haslemere Town Council in making sure that youth provision works. And I'll just conclude by saying thanks to our officers and to Councillor Merriweather for their work on the subject, and also just to all the Haslemere members for their attendance and engagement at the session of the Executive a few weeks ago, and also just to confirm what I said at the end of that meeting. If this is approved this evening, the FAQs that we created as a result of that meeting will go live tomorrow morning, which of course you'll be able to share in detail with all residents, and it will deal with many of the questions that we've been talking about here tonight, and probably a few of the others that have come up over the course of the day since that. I'm sure Councillor Merriweather will detail deal with some of the more detailed questions. But again, I commend this very important, very necessary local plan, neighbourhood plan led requirement in Haslemere. And to be quite honest, if we don't build our own housing in Haslemere and deliver it in a way that we can actually afford, well, then we default to things like Red Court, which everybody absolutely adored, because what we definitely need in Haslemere is more large 5-bed executive houses for all those people who are working in healthcare and education on low salaries, as our economic development plan has just highlighted. They can definitely afford to live there. I'd prefer we build some things like this. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you. Because I recently stepped down from the executive and my responsibility there on housing strategy, I'd like to address that particular aspect. And I was startled to hear Councillor Atkins say that we perhaps give too much emphasis to new affordable housing. And frankly, I think that it is the key priority for our community that we no longer have a waiting list of over 1,000 people waiting for homes. And one of the ways in which we can address that is to take the rare opportunities that we have to develop housing on brownfield sites. We're all aware that when we look at housing proposals on greenfield, there's always intense opposition. But where it is possible to do it on brownfield, I'd be surprised if there was serious objection on a widespread basis. The current site is an embarrassment. It's something which isn't worthy of Haslemere, it isn't worthy of anywhere, and it is primarily used for the benefit of people out of the community. The criticism of having a supermarket, small supermarket on the site also seems to me misplaced. We all pay lip service to the idea that it should be possible for communities to obtain the basic services they need in walking distance. We shouldn't have to drive everywhere. Here's an example where we're looking at a new development of homes and basic food shop immediately available to them. That makes sense to me, and I think it's better than the outdated model that we've often seen in Britain, that you have housing in one place and shopping somewhere out of reach, which can only in practice be used by car or by the public transport, which government policy has made so difficult to maintain. So, despite the somewhat scattergun criticisms and speculative comments that it might even be a slum, I think that we really need to move ahead with this, and there will be ample opportunity as the project develops to influence the design and to influence the exact balance of the project. It would be a failure of our responsibility if we step back from it now and enter into yet another round of contemplation while this embarrassing pseudo car park just rots on.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I think starting off with the consensus, which I think was summarised in the last statement that Councillor Palmer just made, I think we are agreed that this is a site which is of significant value. Continued use in its present form is unsustainable in every sense of the word. What we have here is a council asset, and with a council asset, as I think Councillor Merriweather suggested earlier on, we need to be able to use it and use it to maximise the benefit to the local community and maximise the benefit to the planet, and if possible, both. And it's quite interesting that when you start looking at a site like this, you begin to learn a lot about it when you talk to local residents, and I think the long history of the site, and I've learned a lot about the history of the site over recent weeks, was summed up by an elderly resident of Haslemere, and I quote, "It's a site with a long history whose future has always been mired in gossip and controversy." And so I think now we are in a position to kind of close down the gossip and minimise the controversy, although I think some members of the opposition will always find controversy with whatever we do, and actually essentially suggest that we wash our hands of a site and put it into the hands of private developers as soon as possible. This is a site which is of huge benefit to the local community as a mixed-use development, clearly highlighted by Councillor Rabini with his huge experience of working with that local community. And of course, we can criticise elements of the proposal. And, you know, we'll never get perfection because we are so straitjacketed, we are so constrained in terms of what we can do as a council as a result of our current government and the constraints that they continue to place upon us. But a lot of work has gone into this. As the exempt papers clearly show, we are working within constraints, but I think we are doing our utmost to build comfortable homes that local residents can afford to live in, meet local housing needs, and create facilities that our community needs. And I know that local people in Haslemere are particularly excited by the prospect of the proposed new community hub. I think there's huge potential there. And I think, you know, we are constrained in what we can do here, but I think what we have got here is a very sensible and helpful set of proposals to move forward the community in Haslemere to the maximum benefit.
Thank you. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, I think the conversation, has been really interesting, but I do think that we need to look at the recommendation within the papers, and that is just to secure a budget estimate and also an allocation to move to the next steps. We're at the very beginning of this project. Talk about creating slums or talk about, what something is actually going to look like. We're nowhere near there, and I think we're jumping ahead of ourselves here. We're really at the very beginning. And, I love the fact that, Councillor Atkins thinks she can get it for 50k, Sounds like bypassing all appropriate procurement processes. Sounds too good to be true, which I think it probably is. I think that it's really important that we recognise that we've got a difficult site here. It is quite difficult, as in the topography. I think we also need to recognise that viability would come into a site like this, absolutely. We are committed to trying to provide affordable housing. And as Councillor Rabini said, that's really important in Haslemere. And we are committed to providing good quality environmental affordable housing as well. And I think, what really comes into it, coming back to the viability, is let's look back, look at the mini budget. Oh my God, soaring costs we've had to face. We've had to face those costs. Things have changed on this site in the last, over the last year. We are looking at providing affordable housing for people that work hard, people like teachers, Remember the See the Person campaign within that was run to tackle the common misrepresentations of social housing tenants. We've got hard-working doctors, hard-working nurses, hard-working teachers that need affordable homes. Social mobility has gone out of the window. Very nice for Councillor Atkins. But how many young people do we know that work hard and cannot even look at buying a house? We are looking at plugging that gap. If the government could provide us with help with doing that, thank you very much. That would be very nice, and I would definitely accept that. We are in a different world. We are looking at providing a community hub. I went to see the Hive yesterday in Guildford to look at the really important work they're doing there. It is great. They provide gaming nights for young people. It is a thriving hub of the community. All sorts of people using that. I look at the Godalming Youth Club and the Youth Hub and what Godalming Town Council has achieved there, you know, with their building. And Hazelmere does deserve that. But realistically, we need money to be able to provide that. We are plugging the gap on youth services. The heart has been pulled out of youth services. There is nothing for young people. And if they doss about, well, it's no wonder. There's nothing for them. We need to provide that. We need to plug those gaps in many ways. And this site is providing multiple opportunities. Housing, somewhere for people to work, and also providing a community hub as well. And, you know, we are at the beginning of seeing how that can all come about. We're at the beginning of our journey. We can't go on a journey without having an idea of the budget. That would be ridiculous. So that is all we are doing now. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
One moment. Did you have a point of order?
It's just really a point of clarification. When I said my son dosses on a sofa, I didn't mean that's all he does. I just mean he can't sit on a sofa. He is actually a commercial lawyer. I just like
Thank you for clarifying that.
Good to know. Just to reassure Councillor Barker-Lomax, I did see your hand, but we are only allowed to speak once on each agenda item. Okay, so I'm going to go to those who haven't spoken. Councillor Nicholson first, then Councillor Martin. Yep. Sorry. Sorry, got the name wrong.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I fully support this project quite clearly, but I'd like to emphasize a couple of aspects which are fore of my mind. One of which is what Councillor Townsend has raised, that we are at the beginning of a journey. We're committing some monies to make it clearer what it is that we're going to be producing on that site. And there will be lots of opportunity, I am sure, if we follow a reasonable democratic process, for the council to be able to air its views as to what the next step should be. It'll be a checkpoint before we proceed and before the full 21 millions or 19 millions or whatever it's required to produce the end product. But what is I think very important is in my mind is the rebuilding and provision of a new youth hub and youth centre or community hub, or call it what you will. The current building is in the last stages of collapse and if we're going to have something like that, it needs to be replaced. The committee which runs the Youth Hub is very active, and I believe, you can confirm that probably, Mark, that they are actively engaged in thinking about what should be the design and content of the new community hub. And by the way, those are all, the committee which runs that are ex-Conservative mayors and councillors from Hazelmere and know the area very well. So I would fully endorse what is being provided. I recognise also that there is the issue of parking, which you guys in Cranley have been made fully aware of. And I'm sure that will be part of what's going to be reviewed as, during this next stage, because it's going to be critical, if only just to make sure that we don't have riots in Haslemere about inadequate or inappropriate off-street parking. But it has to happen. And I just cannot think of anybody wanting to stop that happening. Well, I'll check your judgment later on. I fully support this project, and I fully support the next step, which we are being asked to support.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, can I just say how much I agree with those people who are saying this fairground site needs to change. I mean, nobody would accept that the continued use as it is today is in any way appropriate, and I share those thoughts and those concerns. I do understand from Councillor Townsend that we're talking about a budget estimate, but I'm always suspicious of budget estimates because they have a life of their own and they do become the plans, and we have to be very careful. My concerns that I do think we have a deficient business case here, deficient business plan. Gosh, am I down to 30 seconds already? Councillor Ward is already saying yes, and I'm very concerned for the future. Yeah, right. So I do think we have a poorly thought out business plan here. It's using out of date data. I think we've had an inadequate options analysis. I know that the administration says it's had lots of options and looked at them, but I haven't seen so many of those options. And I always have a concern on so many of these projects, and I continue to have a concern as to value for money. And I don't think that we're getting the right value for money from this. And I understand that there's a long way to go. I do have, I share the serious concerns that the covering document highlights in paragraph 9, risk 2, paragraph 9.4, and the risk of the competitive dialogue procurement process not yielding, I think it says wield, I think it means yield, a suitable development partner or commercial tenant for the retail space, and the project doesn't doesn't progress to the next stage. I think that's a pretty serious concern. I think it's going to be very tough to get a supermarket into that location. Supermarkets, as I understand it, don't really like having apartments above their premises. I think a supermarket would be reluctant to become the lead development partner where they don't own the site. And I think also with supermarkets, as we've heard, car parking is a big issue for them. And the sort of supermarket that I think is in sight, or that the administration has in sight, would want a minimum of 100 parking spaces dedicated to the supermarket. And we've heard how we'll need parking for residents. And then the document here notes the fact that we've got to be mindful of short-term car parking for Way Hill shops. So how are we going to do all of that within the confines of what's done here? I think the car parking has not been particularly well thought out. And Councillor Merriweather makes great play on the fact that we're discharging our duties to LP2 and the democratic mandate. Well, only 3 years ago, we were going to have 55 houses, and then we've changed that to 22 houses and a supermarket. Now we're saying, oh, it's not 22, it's 32 houses and a supermarket. So we do seem to, change things around quite a lot. I have to say, I think a value for money approach would perhaps have more housing. In fact, perhaps all housing rather than the current proposal. So I have a lot of concerns, and I will be opposing the proposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Busby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're obviously jumping the gun significantly here to be discussing the design at this stage, but I did just want to quickly share that I did live in a flat above a supermarket for about 8 years, actually. Very happily, secured through shared ownership. Could not have been prouder of my home, and the last thing my neighbours or I, the people that were actually living there and needed those homes on various tenures, thought it was anything approaching a slum at all. So I'm very pleased to support this scheme moving forward to the next stage. Thank you.
Thank you. I have two more speakers, Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Reid. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to spend my first year in council listening and learning. I'm very young, and so I wanted to take the time to observe. I do want to do a bit of throat clearing. I'm very pro sustainable development and suitable development. I'm speaking as someone who doesn't see a lot of faces like hers on the council. I'm 27 years old. My parents still live in Shottermill. My lovely grandma lives on Bunch Lane. I commute to Hazelmere daily. I'm part-time carer for her. I don't want to waffle for ages, and I certainly don't want to go to the design stage of this at all. But I really want some sort of reassurance or consideration for the traffic side of things here. I don't want to talk about the premise of development. As I said, I'm very pro-development, but for anyone that genuinely frequents that road between Hazelmere High Street and Way Hill, it is a nightmare. For anyone commuting, it is a nightmare. And I think my question is more about the traffic on the highways. We can go to design later, but the traffic on that highway is not great. And for parking that has to be provided there, I think it's a major concern, and kind of any reassurance that we can get on those parking provision, highways numbers, I think I'd be quite keen to receive. And I also think, just as a side note, that the comment about Councillor Atkins and getting her mates to do something for 50 grand is lowball. I don't think that's required here. I think we can do better. It's not what she said.
No. Okay. Point of order. Do you have a point of order? You have a point of order.
Right, that's different.
That is different. So unless you have a point of order, if it's a point of personal explanation. Personal explanation. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, there are two opportunities to come in at this stage in the debate. Firstly, to raise a point of order, which is when you believe the council is acting unlawfully or in breach of its constitution, or a personal explanation, which is to correct a part of an earlier speech where you feel you're being misrepresented. So I think the councillor is trying to make a personal explanation.
If that is the case, please make that point.
I feel I'm being misrepresented. At no time did I ever say that I wanted to get my mates in for £50,000. I'm trying to bring my experience here today for the benefit of the community, which is why I became a councillor. I'd also like to note that I never said that there was an overfocus on housing delivery to the detriment of business. I took that straight out of the economic development strategy as feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No one said it yet, but I will, and I've only rejoined during the last year, this council. But I think that this administration is to be commended for the progress it has made over the last 5 years, particularly with regard to social housing. It's been interesting listening to the debate this evening that the opposition have come forward with different ideas, but that's exactly what they are. To quote some famous politicians now, one of whom leads the country, I don't think that they have a plan. They are saying this to muddy the water a little bit for this administration. This administration is going in the right direction. If their thoughts were so good, I just wonder why in the previous 12 years prior to 2019, that when they were the administration, they hadn't done something with all of these sites which suddenly we are bringing into use for the community. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. I don't see any other fresh hands, so I'm going to pass to Councillor Merriweather to sum up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I first apologise to Councillors Nicholson, Councillor Weldon and Councillor Zoe Barker-Lomax. You're right. I haven't checked the border does go literally down the middle of the road, and that will be corrected. Right. You know, there are times when I am very glad that these meetings are being recorded, and they are there for everybody to see on YouTube. Not necessarily when I'm speaking, but I think we've heard some real gems this evening, particularly from the Conservative seats that I would encourage anybody, not just from Hazelmere, but from across the borough, to digest. Particularly the Hazelmere residents will be thrilled to know what the councillors from Farnham and Bramley and Wonersh think that they should be doing in their town. I think that's going to be quite interesting. I'll go in order. Councillor Atkins, I don't know whether you were suggesting VIP, you know, fast lanes or procurement lanes or not, but what I do know is that the residents of Farnham are looking at a hole in the middle of their town, and there are 5,500 planning applications approved that haven't gone through to a development. You will forgive a certain amount of scepticism in this room that the private sector is capable of delivering a fraction of what you believe it's capable of. We have a local plan part 2. We are here to deliver value for money, and I appreciate that we may disagree on what value says. I go to the documents produced by your government about what value is, the Green Book. There's one particular edition signed by Liz Truss, which tells us that social value outcomes is the value side of the value for money equation. Talking about, we've talked about councils that go bankrupt. Councils that go bankrupt tend to be councils that have invested in commercial property to replace the funding that they have lost since Eric Bickles' time as part of his deliberate strategy to pilfer the business rates out of councils like this and encourage them to go out and invest in risky investments to replace the lost revenue that's come through from taxation. As to your questions, as to your written questions, I know that Candice had circulated a detailed list of frequently asked questions, and I believe your questions came in after ONS, after you'd left early, but I do believe that they've all been answered satisfactorily one way or the other. But I would like to say that we are a council. We operate to a different risk profile. It's our council taxpayers, it's our residents who we are taking risks on behalf of. They are not shareholders. They don't have a choice to get out like a shareholder can. We have to be very, very mindful that we can't go out maximising returns for risks that our residents don't want us to take. Councillor Cockburn, I am disappointed that someone who has championed local planning and championed our neighbourhood plans could be so dismissive of what has ended up in as an allocated site in local plan part 2. Local plan part 2 is very, very explicit as to what we should be steering for in this site. I think you contradicted yourself, not least in saying that we should be maximising the residential on that site, but at the same time maximising the quality. That's not necessarily mutually compatible, particularly when we're talking about looking at homes that need to be maybe for young families, may want a balcony, something like that. Maximising the quality is equally important to us. And I would like to point out that the original draft of LPP2 for this site, which did have 55 homes on it, was pulled in 2019, not 3 years ago, Councillor Martin. It was pulled in 2019 before the last election for reasons that I don't think were ever explained properly at the time. So let's go back to Councillor Austin. I repeat all of that. This is LPP2, it's mixed use, and it is as a result of the independent, expert, professional advice that we have taken, that we have arrived where we have. I couldn't actually see anything else in what you said that just wasn't speculation about what might happen at the end of this process going in. So I'm not entirely sure whether there's anything constructive I can say without actually feeding that speculation. Only to add that payback periods, obviously, in the public sector, and particularly when you're talking about social housing, are a completely different universe to what happens in the private sector. And Candice gave a very detailed analysis of the valuations. There is a frequently asked questions appendix or annex to this document. And there is another annex in this document that sets out at least 5 scenarios of what
Councillor Merriweather, are you winding up?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Yes, as soon as I can. As to what the open market value is, and it explains it all very, very, very clearly. And I'd just like to thank Councillor Townsend and Councillor Davison for bringing us back into the room in terms of what the recommendations actually say. All right. Thank you very much, mate.
Well done.
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. Thank you. Can I ask for a recorded vote as well? Thank you.
You need 5 people in support. Yep. Okay, so I shall read the recommendation before we come to the recorded vote. The recommendation for council to approve this evening is: Executive recommends a budget estimate of £21,408,334 for the capital works to complete the project, including an allocation of £280,410 for the procurement of the required services for the next stage of the project. When your name is called, please vote.
Councillor Lauren Atkins.
Against.
Councillor Jane Austen.
Against.
Councillor Zoe Barker-Glomax.
Against.
Councillor David Beeman.
For.
Councillor Dave Busby.
For.
Councillor Peter Clark.
For.
Councillor Carol Coburn.
Against.
Councillor Jerome Davidson.
For.
Councillor Kevin Denis. Councillor Adam Deuce.
For.
Councillor Tony Fairclough.
For.
Councillor Paul Follows.
For.
Councillor Maxine Gale. Oh, she's left, hasn't she? Apologies. Councillor Michael Higgins.
For.
Councillor Jackie Keane.
For.
Councillor Victoria Keel.
For.
Councillor Andrew Lawton.
For.
Councillor Gemma Long.
For.
Councillor Andy MacLeod.
For.
Councillor Peter Martin.
Against.
Councillor Mark Merriweather. Councillor Keith Mirrlees.
For.
Councillor Alan Morrison.
For.
Councillor David Munro. Councillor George Murray.
For.
Councillor Peter Nicholson. Councillor Nick Palmer.
For.
Councillor Ken Reid.
For.
Councillor Ruth Reid.
For.
Councillor Paul Rivers.
For.
Councillor John Rubini.
For.
Councillor Julian Spence.
For.
Councillor James Staunton. Councillor Richard Steiger.
For.
Councillor Phoebe Sullivan.
Abstain.
Councillor Liz Townsend.
For.
Councillor Philip Townsend. Councillor Terry Wheeldon,
4.
Councillor Graham White,
4.
Councillor Steve Williams,
4.
Councillor Alan Waker,
Abstain.
Councillor Penny Rivers,
4.
Councillor John Ward.
4.
That is carried 33 for, 7 against and 2 abstentions. So that is carried. We come now to agenda item number 11, the Community Infrastructure Levy Bidding Cycle 2023-4. And I ask for the chair of the SIL board to please introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I don't think it's anything you've said because you haven't said it yet.
Well, you know, it's water off a duck's back these days. But actually, I'm going to be. They may be disappointed. I'm actually going to be very brief. I'm going to gladly propose this, but actually, I'm going to ask my seconder to make the detailed remarks in my stead, if that's okay. Thanks.
And your seconder is? Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Do I have your permission to stand and speak at the same time?
If you can do it.
Oh.
Yes, I'm just about to do it.
I'll sit back down again if I can't get my face in. Thank you. Good evening, members. Having had to listen to me speak on the Farnham infrastructure project on many occasions over the last few years, you will be disappointed to hear that this could be the very last opportunity you have. It has taken 4 years of painstaking consultation on numerous proposals and designs just to get to this stage. The FIP is an unusual project, as it's the first time all 3 tiers of local authority have worked together in this way. The recommendation made by the Executive to Council is not to address any technical aspects of the project, but to approve Surrey's SIL bid to partially fund the town centre improvements in Farnham. In June of last year, Surrey's Cabinet approved their £14 million of funding. But that funding can only be drawn down once match funding has been secured from strategic SIL contributions from both Waverley and Farnham Town Councils. The FIP was formed in 2019, and the first job was to agree the programme vision, which is supported by 3 objectives for Farnham. 1, provide well-connected communities across the town and the surrounding area. Support the economic vitality of the town. And thirdly, to improve the quality of place with clean air and less dominance of traffic. Farnham, like other towns in the borough, has seen significant housing development, both within the town and the surrounding area, with no investment in its infrastructure. In Waverley's local plan, Farnham has a housing target of over 2,000 additional homes. And the NPPF states, local planning authorities should work with other authorities to assess the quality and capacity of the infrastructure and transport. This has not happened. Our local plan is supported by the Infrastructure Delivery Plan, which did identify an infrastructure requirement for Farnham's town centre. to be funded from a mix of funding from Surrey and strategic so. This has not happened yet. This lack of investment in Farnham over many years has left its road network struggling to cope with the increase in traffic, resulting in significant congestion, and you can just imagine the severe impact on the town's air quality. Now, Waverley has a legal duty to provide an air quality action plan, and the latest one, created just over a year ago, has 3 priorities, 2 of which specifically relate to the FIP. 1, to work with Surrey County Council to ensure that the Farnham infrastructure project is agreed and delivered. And secondly, to report on an annual basis the impact the Farnham infrastructure project will make on Waverley's clean air strategy. In summary, this journey has certainly not been all one-way traffic. And along the way, we have managed to avoid numerous potholes. But we're at the crossroads now, and the road ahead seems to be clear. So members, please make the right to turn by giving the green light to this recommendation when asked to vote by the Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm speaking tonight as an elected Farnham Ward Councillor and also as Farnham Town Council's elected collective voice representative on the FIP board. I'd like to express my appreciation of Waverley's SIL Executive Working Group to recommend the allocation of just over £3.2 million of SIL receipts split equally over the financial years 2023-4 and 24-25 as Waverley's contribution to the costs involved in implementing the proposals for Farnham Town Centre that have been identified in the FIP. As we are all aware, local authorities are currently facing difficult financial decisions. And from the report before councillors, there were a number of bids for SIL funding that have not been able to be met because it exceeded the amount that was available. As road traffic continued to grow, there's been increased traffic congestion in Farnham Town Centre, as Councillor Carcus identified, and the consequential deterioration in air quality and the designation of Farnham Town Centre as an air quality management area in 2005, yes, nearly 20 years ago, there being only one other such area remains. Over the years, there have been many studies which have put forward proposals to resolve Farnham's traffic problems, but to date, none of these proposals have actually been implemented. The geographical and historical restraints of Farnham physically restrict what can be done without materially affecting the character of the town, which makes it such a pleasant place to live, work and visit. Whilst the ultimate answer would be to construct a Western Relief Road, which would then allow Farnham Town Centre to be pedestrianised, it has to be recognised that such a scheme cannot in current circumstances be afforded, and in any case, new roads tend to generate even greater traffic and would therefore unlikely to meet climate change objectives. The proposals that have been identified in the FIP may not be perfect, but they are realistic and achievable and will improve the situation in Farnham Town Centre, making it a more attractive place to live, work and visit and improve air quality. Finally, I would like to give credit to be given to the Surrey County Council as the Highway Authority, in particular their leader, Councillor Tim Oliver, who has led the FIP programme. It has shown how 3 levels of local government, Surrey County, Waverley Borough and Farnham Town Councils, all of which under different political control, can work together to achieve real overall benefits. Surrey has allocated £14 million to the implementation of FIP, and I hope that all members will now support Waverley's SIL Executive Group's recommendation of an allocation of just over £3.2 million of SIL funds to implement the FIP proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beaman. We have several speakers now. Councillor Coburn, you're the first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd love to stand up and say I'm totally against this, but of course I'm not. I'm totally for it. I just like the look on your faces. I have to say, I go back slightly further than the 4 years, because it's about 10 years ago that Jeremy Hunt had a meeting in the Bush Hotel and he had a panel about pedestrianisation. And I went on that panel and I was actually opposed to what he was suggesting because I didn't think pedestrianisation was possible. I've lived through all the studies practically of the town centre. And in fact, the 10th one was a summary of the previous 9, the Scott Wilson one, but it was a very, very good study. So I have to say, it is with great relief that we've got this far. I didn't really follow that pedestrian, as I say, I wasn't a pedestrianisation fan, but the survey gave the impetus because they then had a survey that Jeremy Hunt carried out, and that survey went into Surrey to convince Surrey that Farnham had a point and needed something spent on it. And I think the inaugural meeting, somebody could correct me, was it in the Maltings of the Farnham Infrastructure Programme? I can't remember, but it was a meeting with Jeremy Hunt, Tim Oliver, as you say, and you've got to say Tim has been with us right the way through here, despite all the ups and downs. I haven't always liked or approved of the process, I have to be honest. I thought some of it was arcane, some of it was unnecessarily confidential, some of it didn't follow up when they'd spoken to the public. And I think the one thing you do when you have forums or getting the public is to go back to them and say, yes, this is why we're doing it, or no, this is why we're not. So I have been a little bit, what should we say, vocal with both Jeremy Hunt and Tim Oliver, and indeed with other members of the FIP, but it was only because ultimately all of us just want something better in Farnham. I hope some of the items that are coming in, the quick wins, are going to really improve everything about it. You know, the atmosphere both for the pedestrians, but also for cyclists and indeed for the car users. I hope it all works, and I will give it my full support. One of the problems we have, and other towns have the same thing, is our conservation area is our sort of living area, our shopping area, our area where the cars are concentrated. And this is a big issue because you don't want so much signage all around while you're delivering a project that then obscures the beauty. I mean, Castle Street was named as one of the most beautiful Georgian streets. Slight misnomer, but we're not going to the history. It is a beautiful, beautiful street. And the last thing we want is signs everywhere, you know, saying this is a wonderful area when you can't see it because of the signage. So I hope everyone will support this. I really do want the FIP to take off. The town looks a mess because money hasn't been spent on it recently. And I think everybody, you know, who can support this, and I hope when some of it takes place and there are visible changes in the town, that you will flood in, spend your money, do whatever else. Go to one of our many coffee shops. I can actually put them in order if you like. And I can tell you which are the best cakes too to go with your coffee.
And
so
spend money in the car park.
Oh gosh, of course, spend money, just throw it around when you're in Farnham. But basically, you know, I think this is excellent news, and I do hope it kickstarts the change that Farnham really needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's that old adage that Farnham is a town of 40,000 traffic engineers and 40,000 opinions. And I think actually that latter stat undersells the capacity of residents in Farnham to hold more than one contradictory opinion on the Farnham infrastructure plan, in that there are at least 80,000 different opinions on the subject of what should happen in Farnham. I've been an itinerant member of the Farnham Infrastructure Board since 2019, when John and I were also at the sessions with Jeremy and Tim, attempting to bring some coherence back into something that had been floating around for some time. I'm very pleased to see that the perfect hasn't been the enemy of the good in regards to this, and that there are a number of areas where minor issues that I think would be resolvable in the fullness of time could have prevented the entire scheme from being delivered at all. And I'm glad that those who had those opinions have had the conversations with who they need to have in order to make sure that this can go ahead unimpeded. I'm also particularly glad to see that Surrey County Council is capable of putting forward a SIL bid for large-scale infrastructure that is actually perfectly good and able to pass through the scrutiny of the SIL board. It gives me some hope that there will be other bids coming in other areas that will also be of a suitable quality for the SIL board to review and pass in other parts of Waverley, where there is, of course, a significant need for highways infrastructure almost everywhere to some degree. It is a little disappointing that the majority of the funding for this entire scheme has again come from the local government sphere, as opposed to any other national ends of this, because national highways and national infrastructure should be something that is a bit more better better funded and better managed by the state at large. But local government has again pulled its finger out to try and make this work. So I'm again incredibly supportive of this plan. I think that we'll be needing to offer, alongside Surrey and others, support to the residents of Farnham in making this work through the process, and also trying to make sure that we don't get any unnecessary duplication of issues or doing, I'm trying to find a way to phrase this. There will be a lot of instances where things regarding Brightwells and this project, if they're done at the same time, will cause issues in Farnham, and we all need to try and do our very best to help avoid those or help people get through them and around them if those things occur. So this is, I think, I'm not going to use all, I mean, Peter's probably used every highways cliche it's possible to add. I don't even think I can think of any more at this time of night. But we do need to make sure that this first step in, well, not this 10th step in a very long journey, which definitely won't be the last, is now backed up with our support to the people of Farnham to actually make this work and to take those issues that we know that will come from this and work with Surrey and work with anybody that we need to work with to make sure that they're dealt with as swiftly and as painlessly as possible. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I have seen 4 other people who'd like to speak. Councillor Palmer, Councillor MacLeod, Councillor Murray, and for the first time, Councillor Earwaker. So, Councillor Palmer first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As chair of the SIL committee the last few years, I'd just like to make a couple of general comments. The quality of the bids has varied over the years quite a lot. And it's worth asking councillors in general if they can work with local projects to try to ensure that they have the best chance of success. Now, although the stress so far has been on the Farnham project, in fact, 10 different projects you will have seen were approved for SIL funding in the proposal. But a number were not, and the reasons were fairly consistent. Quite often, applicants failed to give clear evidence of wide community benefit and wide community support. And I think that's perhaps because they felt that it was self-evident. They were too close to the projects. So it didn't occur to them that when submitting it to a committee who might not be as close to the issue, that they needed to actually show that it would produce additional benefits for the wider community and that there was a lot of local support. And that brings me to the second point, which is match funding. The SIL budget is substantial, but it's not infinite. And the committee felt quite strongly that it would be desirable for projects to be able to show that they were able to raise money to support the project so that it wasn't entirely being based on raiding the funds of the Borough Council. And the third point was just deliverability. We always looked for a business plan. We looked for evidence that planning permission was either granted or on the way. And we tried to ensure that we were confident that there was a long-term vision of how the costs for the project would be covered in the future. And I think that each of us as individual borough councillors can really help with this kind of scheme, because rightly or wrongly, the SIL committee only comes to a decision once a year. And that means if a project misses out, they have to wait another year before next opportunity comes round. And if, as a councillor, you're able to work with your local community on optimising the project, on talking to officers in advance, there's a much better chance of acceptance. Finally, I'd just like to thank all the colleagues who sat on the SIL committee over the years. It's been a really good example of cross-party collaboration. I don't remember a single argument that was conducted on a part-term basis, and every decision we reached was unanimously reached. So thank you.
Thank you, councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to declare an interest here. I'm the Surrey councillor for Farnham Central, where the first project, the town centre project, will happen. I have to say that, like Councillor Coburn, my involvement with this goes back a very long way. I was first involved in trying to solve Farnham's traffic problems when I was on the committee of the Farnham Society. And they were campaigning for a western bypass. The problem with Farnham is that it's got 4 A roads going through it, and there's only 7 or 8 A roads in the whole of Waverley, and 4 of them go through Farnham. And a great deal of through traffic goes through Farnham town centre. And the town centre is somewhat dominated by traffic. And in the presentation that Councillor Fairgrove gave on behalf of Surrey, they outlined all the problems and the potential solutions. So I won't try to replicate that. But going back to the history of the thing, I first got involved in this more formally in 2017 when I was elected as a Surrey councillor, when Jeremy Hunt approached me at the election count and said he was very frustrated in his efforts to improve Farnham by getting no real support from Surrey or Waverley or the town council, in fact. And he felt that if the Farnham residents would actually work with him and perhaps develop more of a cross-party arrangement, it might have some success. So we'd actually set up an informal committee, including Stephen Spence and myself, the Farnham Residents' Councillor, Wyatt Ramsdale, the Conservative Councillor, and representatives of the Farnham Society and other local bodies. And we campaigned on it to get things done in this area. And it took a long time to happen. And eventually, actually, Jeremy called the meeting that Councillor Coburn referred to, which is actually at the Farnham Herald headquarters in the old courthouse in Farnham, where eventually, finally, we got Tim Oliver on board, which was the really crucial thing as leader of Surrey. In fact, without his support, this would just not have happened. But we also got support from Paul as leader of Waverley and from the representatives of the town council. So it became very much not just a cross-party, but a cross-council project. And that's the way it has some chance of real success. After all the frustrations that Paul referred to, all of the traffic experts that we have in Farnham. So that's where we are. And I'm desperate to see this thing happen. So I hope everybody will support the proposal to provide this money to Farnham. Paul was right that a lot of the money in the first instance is coming from local government, but ultimately there's bigger projects possible. There's an A31 project on the cards as well to improve what's known as the Farnham bypass, which isn't actually a bypass. It cuts the town in half, which is part of the problem in Farnham. It runs parallel with the railway line and the river, and that makes Farnham an extremely difficult place. Not only that, but all the traditional old roads that we have, the old buildings that we have, that make Farnham what it is. But people very much want to live in Farnham, actually. That's part of the problem as well. That's why we have so much pressure on housing in Farnham. People want to live there. It's got a strong community. It's got a very good town centre. It's got terrific education. We've got wonderful schools in Farnham. So having all the success is part of the problem. But in order to make Farnham succeed, we have to have this project. We have to have it succeed. So I would recommend to everybody that they support this proposal, that this money goes to Surrey to help with this project. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, councillor Murray.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be brief. Okay. I'm glad this recommendation is non-controversial. I was expecting it to be. So, and it's straightforward, and it should be. You know what I mean? It's allocating developers' infrastructure levy monies to improve infrastructure in Farnham. So, what's not to like? You know what I mean? This is where it's for. And I know it's been a programme long in the planning, and this is nearly the final hurdle, right? So, you know, it's a once in a generation programme just to get the thing go ahead. I know it's had multiple and prolonged consultation. I was also in one as a business owner 5 or 6 years ago. I remember sitting in on Zoom and Andy was chairing it, and I was never had any dreams of being a councillor, and I even was engaged in it. So, and I know the plan has changed, and I've sat in lots and lots of meetings recently, and the compromises people have had to make, you know, oh, I'm going to resign, and if it doesn't happen, I don't get a bus stop here or whatever here, you know, it has, I know it's been controversial. No one's got everything they wanted, but what we will get, and I know Councillor Coburn, will get safer pedestrian crossings, we'll get wider pavements, we'll get rid of all the railings, bashed up railings all around the town. And we will get better air quality, that is proven already. But what impact it will have on drivers' behaviour? Nobody knows, right? Nobody knows, yeah? We can all guess there, well, you can give as many paramedics, whatever they were called. These, I can't remember what they've got, paramics, yes, that's right, whatever they are called. Yeah, you know what I mean? They ain't going to make any difference. You might need some paramedics as well. But I do know that monitoring is going to continue well into it. So I'd like to pay tribute to everyone involved, from the officers and members of Surrey County Council, from Tim Oliver, from Farnham Town Council, people at Waverley Council and their leadership here for all their hard work and commitment. I'd also like to commend Jeremy Hunt, our MP. He has championed this from the beginning. And I was in a meeting with him as well, and he talked about it. Very recently, I was at the Bush Hotel at the venison dinner when he said he hoped one day to lie down in the borough. Well, I still don't think he's going to get that, I'm afraid. I don't think he's going to get that just quite. I wouldn't advise it. Even with 1 lane and 20 miles an hour, I think he might not. So anyway, I urge all members to approve this recommendation, and let's get the thing going. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Earwacker. Quiet. We have a new councillor ready to speak.
So, Councillor Murray has stolen most of my thunder, actually. I can't claim, like Councillor MacLeod or Councillor Coburn, to be involved in this for decades, because I only moved to Farnham a decade ago. But what I have been intimately involved in the last 5 years, 2 years as Deputy Mayor and 3 years as Mayor of Farnham, and living literally very close to the crossroads at Hickley's Corner. I'm glad that I'm in this chamber with all this unanimity going on around the chamber. Yeah, I know I'm not going to get used to it, but what I really want to say is what George Murray said. It's the 3 levels of council all working together. So Farnham Town Council, Waverley Borough Council and Farnham Town Council all working together. The officers putting in a huge amount of work, councillors putting in a huge amount of work, residents putting in a huge amount of work. We're not going to agree on everything. We're not going to get everything we want, but we've made compromises. And again, I would like to commend Jeremy Hunt for all that he's done in the 5 years that I've been involved. So well done, everyone, and hope we can get this passed unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Merriweather or Councillor Clark, do you feel any need to sum up? Just it's 9:22.
I'm overcome with the warmth of the debate, Madam Mayor. So I'm going to leave it there.
Thank you. So I'll read the recommendation. The recommendation for council to approve this evening is that the council approves to award £3,253,726 SIL funding to Surrey County Council for the Farnham Infrastructure Programme in brackets Town Centre Improvement Scheme to council, split equally across the financial years 2023 and 4 and 2024 and 5. All in favour? Thank you. That is unanimously carried. It is 9:24, so we'll rush along now, shall we? Agenda item 12 is the review of the Constitution Council procedure rules. And I call on the chair of Standards and General Purposes Committee to introduce the recommendation, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's my duty and pleasure to propose on behalf of the Standards and General Purposes Committee that the Council adopts the new Council procedure rules set out on pages 367 to 404 of your agenda papers. The new rules are part of a major work programme being carried out by Susan Sale, the Joint Director, Strategic Director of Legal and Democratic Services, and their team to update our Constitution and procedures and, wherever possible, align them with the Guildford Borough Council Constitution and procedures. There's a great deal of work still to be done in this, but we're making good progress. Members will recall the previous extraordinary meeting of the Council, where the Council agreed to 5 motions related to constitutional matters put forward by our committee. There was little else on the agenda that meeting, and I was embarrassed, Madam Mayor, towards the end of the meeting, where you described it as the Andy MacLeod show or something similar. It's against my policy to keep a low profile, so it's part of my policy to keep a low profile, not against it. So I was failing there. But I may have set a record, actually, Madam Mayor, in that it's possibly the only council meeting where a council member has spoken longer than the leader or any other member of the executive. However, this time we've only got one motion to consider. And Susan, if you look at the report, starting from page 343, I'd like to point out that Susan says in that report this is an extremely high priority for the Council, requiring urgent attention. The report also sets out the procedures that we've gone through to reach this point, and I'll cover them very briefly. It starts with a meeting of the Guildford and Waverley Joint Constitutions Review Group, who look at the recommendations coming from the officers very thoroughly. And we have very long meetings. At the Council, Waverley, at the Guildford Council meeting recently, James Jones, who's the joint chairman of the review group, said it's not everybody's cup of tea, this sort of thing, but it was nevertheless very satisfying, and I agree with that. And all the members of the group have put in a great deal of work, and we've had the benefit of actually some experience. We've had a good mixture of members, some from each party, and we've also had a combination of new councillors and experienced councillors. And in that particular group, Councillor Goodrich, who isn't here this evening, has played a very major part in bringing all his experience and knowledge to bear and helped to improve the procedures being proposed. Equally, when we reached the general purpose, the Standards and General Purposes Committee, Councillor John Ward played a similar role in bringing his experience. He put a great deal of effort into reviewing everything that was being put forward and came forward with some suggestions for improvement. And again, these were incorporated by Susan into the proposals that you see this evening. So that's where we are. I'll point out that I watched the Guildford meeting, which took place last week, and the Guildford Council has approved the procedures before you tonight, pretty well unanimously. There was one abstention. And just as a point of interest, actually, the other thing that Guildford looked at last night was their own ONS procedures. They've actually decided to adopt, and this again was discussed at the Joint Committee and went through the Guildford equivalent to our Standards Committee. They've actually adopted ONS procedures very similar to our procedures, with 2 committees, one dealing with standards and one dealing with services and one dealing with resources. So that was interesting that that's happened. The final thing I wanted to say in this introduction, Madam Mayor, is that I did receive a letter from Councillor Peter Martin putting forward some very interesting and on the face of it valuable suggestions. And we had a meeting before this meeting, a brief meeting with Susan Sale, Peter Martin, myself, and I think we've satisfied Councillor Martin that we will deal properly with his suggestions, but he can speak for that to himself in the debate. So I'd like again to thank Councillor Martin for the effort that he obviously put into reviewing the whole thing, and that's been a feature of this whole process. So I think I have a seconder for this proposal. The Vice Chairman, Councillor Rubini.
Please second, thank you, Madam Mayor.
I'm very happy for the leader to third the proposal.
John, do you want to say anything or just second?
No, I just second at the moment.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Follows, you want to speak next?
Very quickly, just to say on behalf of the executive, very much support this, and actually just thank you for the massive amount of work. It takes a group of exceptionally nerdy, committed individuals, frankly, to plough through at length the Constitution. Particularly, of course, the Councillor Long's very annotated, colourful constitution is, continues to motivate me to continue with this. Just also to add, also discussed with Councillor Martin, I'm sure he'll discuss his points in a moment, and I'm also satisfied that they'll be covered in a subsequent meeting, and that is why I won't be. We were all nearly treated to the strange spectacle of myself and the Leader Opposition jointly proposing an amendment on a subject, but alas, no, I'm afraid not. So no, completely support this, and the ongoing work to deal with two constitutions and making it workable for officers. Some of the next groups of work on this is things like scheme of delegations. So some important stuff still to come. So thank you all for your support on this.
Thank you. Councillor Martin, you would like to speak?
Well, yes, thank you. I won't make the point that this sort of merging of these rules is a further evidence that the collaboration actually is more like a merger than collaboration. I won't make that point. But I will be brief in the spirit of Councillor Murray. The point that I wanted to make, that I made to Andy and to the leader, was that in the detail, our constitution talks about the annual budget meeting, and in that, which is a very important meeting, it says today that the leader has an unlimited amount of time to propose his budget, and the leader of the opposition has 10 minutes. And the rules as we have them at the moment sweeps that away. I was concerned about that because I was really concerned that the leader would never be able to keep to only 6 minutes in the presentation of his budget. And so even if you shared it with Mark Merriweather, that would be impossible. So I did feel sorry for him. No, seriously, I thought that was an important point, and that we really do need, the budget setting is an extremely important process, and we need more time to present and to be part of that. I'm assured that that will now be considered separately as a part of the overall looking at the budget process, and that we will have that sorted out in time for the next meeting that we have. So with that in mind, and that having been resolved, I am very happy to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Reid.
Madam Mayor, just to apologise for my trying to sneak through earlier in the evening one of the provisions of these procedure rules, but I do commend procedure rule 11.4 to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Councillor Reith probably nicked one of the things I was going to say, but I was going to say, looking at the time and looking at how long questions took today, Rule 11 on page 379, I think, would be rather nice not to have to read them all out at every meeting and spend an hour on questions. Thank you, Councillor MacLeod, for your glowing comments on my contribution. I just have one slight concern that one thing we did discuss quite a lot, page 378, item 9, quorum, the last paragraph very clearly says business deferred from that meeting will be discussed at the next meeting, be that ordinary, extraordinary, or special. And at that meeting, I did raise the point that on page 375, 4.2, and 376, 5.2 business, that was not listed as things we could discuss at extraordinary and special meetings. And I do remember that it was agreed that we would.
Thank you, Councillor Ward, for raising the point. If paragraph 1.8 of the report does actually highlight the 3 amendments that were supported by the Standards Committee, and they were also supported by Guildford's Corporate Governance
Sorry, I was
Committee.
reading the wrong bit of paper, was I?
Well, it's not terribly clear, but just for clarity, the recommendation is that these rules are adopted with those 3 amendments as proposed in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. No other speakers?
Could I just say one more thing? I bet you're jolly glad we started at 6 o'clock and not 7 o'clock.
Yep. Councillor MacLeod, would you like to sum up?
Very little to say, Madam Mayor. It's a good discussion, good debate. I'd just like to pick up Councillor Martin on the point that this is to do with merging the 2 councils. I don't think there's any proposal to do that, actually. I look forward to the time in the future, actually, where I'm not a member of Waverley, not a member of Surrey, but I'm a member of a unitary council, actually perhaps involving Waverley, Guildford and maybe one other council. That's the future, I would say, Councillor Martin. Thank you, Madam Mayor. That includes my comment.
Thank you. Right, we'll get through. The recommendation is the Standard and General Purposes Committee recommends that full council approves to adopt the new council procedure rules as set out in Appendix 2 to this report into the Constitution as amended in line with paragraph 1.8 of the report. All in favour?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 13, quarterly report on urgent decisions. Leader, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is part of my constitutional obligation to note on the 15th of February 2024, I made a special urgency decision pursuant to Council Procedural Rule 14.2 to purchase a residential property in Farnham. Councillor Peter Martin has been duly agreed this in his role as Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny Resources, that the decision was urgent because further delay to the purchase of the property may have caused the vendor to withdraw from the process. Madam Mayor, if there are any further questions, I'm of course willing to take them, but my hope is that the papers are fairly self-explanatory.
I see no questions, so is that noted? Noted. Agenda item 14, procedure rule 14.2, changes to the Constitution. Susan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Also part of my constitutional duty is that Article 14.2 provides me with authority to make minor amendments to the Constitution and then to ask Council to note them and to advise Council that in consultation with the Executive Head of Regulatory Services, I've corrected a transcription error in section Q1 of the Officer Scheme of Delegation to the Executive Head of Regulatory Services on 7th of February this year to reinstate provisions that had not been copied across in July last year following the joint management restructure of the preceding year. This correctly reinstates the provisions that had been omitted. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that duly noted?
Noted.
Thank you. There are no motions. So move to agenda item 17, which is the minutes of the executive. No, 16 was motions. There are no motions, so moving to 17. Is that all right, Peter? I beg your pardon. Well, to move the recommendation that the minutes of the executive meetings held on the 9th of January 2024, 6th of February 2024, and the 5th of March 2024 be received and noted. Are they noted? Thank you. Could be agenda item 18 then. It says 19 on mine. Okay.
It does. We've skipped one. I apologise.
That's, well, shall we skip it? We'll skip 18. Agenda item 19 then, minutes of the Standards and General Purposes Committee. The recommendation is that the minutes of the Standards and General Purposes Committee meeting held on 8th of January 2024 be received and noted. Is that noted? Thank you. And you will be glad that at 21:39, that is the end of the meeting.